Chapter 1442, Another Method. I just need to help you with this problem. Surefeng gave the Countess a confused look. He hadn't expected another option to be available. Honestly, even a super guild would be hard-pressed to collect 5 million magic crystals within a month. Even with the manatite vein, it would be a challenge. Sadly, it'd be impossible to obtain 100,000 mana stones any other way. After all, not everyone was lucky enough to have a fragment of the Philosopher's Stone. Without the Philosopher's Stone, a guild's main source of mana stones would be bosses in 100-man dungeons. Having their alchemists synthesize mana stones would be impractical, as well, doing so would even bankrupt a super guild. That's right. I need someone to help me retrieve an item. However, the item is in a somewhat special location. The higher a visitor's tier is, the more dangerous the location is. Since you are only tier 2, you should have a chance of securing the item, Katie Green said, nodding. Suddenly, however, she chuckled softly and said, but before you go, you'll have to pass a test of strength. Countess, I am willing to give it a try. Surefeng agreed without hesitation. This was an opportunity to obtain one of the 7 treasures. Naturally, he couldn't afford to turn it down. Besides, the quest was far more reliable than affording the unrealistic price of 5 million magic crystals. Throughout their conversation, Surefeng had understood one thing: the later he discovered Countess Katie Green's ownership of the Bracelet of Time, the harder it would be to obtain it. She had already stated that the quest would become more dangerous as one reached higher tiers, lowering the player's chances of success. Good. Follow me. Katie Green then stood and walked towards a dark corridor in a corner of the indoor garden. The corridor was narrow, and the only light came from candles set in intervals. As they ventured further down the corridor, the air became colder. After walking for about 10 minutes or so, they arrived in an empty hall. A set of locked, steel doors loomed at the end of the room. The steel doors were entirely covered in frost. Even though Surefeng's ice resistance was high, he was still cold. If a player with lower ice resistance came here, they'd freeze to death. Not bad. You've endured this far without my help. You have passed the first test. Katie Green nodded in approval when she noticed the cold barely affect Surefeng. Your second test is next, a test of your combat power. As Katie Green spoke, a silver magic scroll appeared in her hands. She unfurled it and began to chant an incantation. Suddenly, a silver magic array appeared before the Countess, gathering the surrounding mana. A moment later, a 3-meter-tall humanoid creature manifested in the middle of the array. This humanoid figure wore silver armor and carried a great sword that radiated frosty air. Unlike ordinary humans, dark green flames danced in the figure's eyes. Hell Knight, Undead, Great Lord. Level 57. HP 15,000/15,000,000. Kill this Hell Knight, and you will pass the second test, Katie Green said as she gestured towards the Hell Knight. System, you have accepted Katie Green's second test. Quest content, clear the second test. Your reward will vary depending on your evaluation. Before Surefeng could even read the system notification, the Hell Knight roared and unsheathed the great sword from its back. It dashed straight for Surefeng, giving him no time to prepare. The Great Lord-ranked Hell Knight crossed the 20 yards separating them in the blink of an eye. Upon arriving before Surefeng, the Hell Knight brandished its great sword, the weapon transforming into 3 streaks of silver light as they flew towards the swordsman. The Hell Knight had completed the entire process as smoothly as flowing water. The Hell Knight moved like an expert with years of combat experience. There were no excess movements in its actions. High intelligence. Surefeng was surprised to see the sword lights moving towards him. He had assumed that he'd have to face a weakened Great Lord, but the Hell Knight's combat techniques were clearly superior to ordinary Great Lords. The Great Lord had obviously reached the half-step refinement realm standard. In response, Surefeng countered with Killing Ray. Dang! 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 Sparks scattered as a series of clangs echoed throughout the empty hall. Shifeng was forced back by 5 steps before he could stabilize his body. Meanwhile, 3 damages of over -1,500 appeared above his head. In contrast, the Hell Knight remained unharmed. Shifeng's counterattack had only paused the Great Lord's attack. After the initial clash, Shifeng knew that he was no match for the Hell Knight's strength. In fact, there was a large gap between them. What power! Shifeng began to take this fight seriously as the Hell Knight charged towards him once again. He immediately executed void steps, vanishing. Although Shifeng had only clashed with the Hell Knight for a moment, he had gained a rough prediction of the monster's standards. Not only did the Hell Knight have the strength of a Grand Lord, but its reactions and speed also ranked near the top among Great Lords of the same level. If not for his 3 fragmented legendary items, it would have already killed him. Not a bad technique. Unfortunately, it is useless against the Hell Knight. When Shifeng had disappeared, Katie Green had been slightly surprised. However, she shook her head and chuckled. The Hell Knight wasn't a living being, and although it could see, it could also rely on its ability to detect living beings during a fight. Even if Shifeng's footwork technique removed him from his opponent's sight, he couldn't erase his aura as a living creature. Unless he entered a different space entirely, the Hell Knight could keep track of him. Indeed, even after Shifeng had vanished, the Hell Knight showed no signs of hesitation. The massive creature thrust its great sword into the ground. Suddenly, dozens of ice swords rained down from above, targeting a seemingly unoccupied location. Pang! 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 Before the ice swords struck the ground, their trajectories diverted as if they had encountered an invisible wall. At the same time, Shifeng reappeared. Each ice sword carried 100% of the Hell Knight's strength. As a result, Shifeng lost a little bit of his HP each time he deflected an ice sword. In less than a second, he had lost over 20,000 HP. While Shifeng dealt with the descending ice swords, the Hell Knight pulled its weapon from the ground and ran at the swordsman. As it reached Shifeng, it swung its greatsword skillfully, matching the timing of its swings with the final 8 ice swords. Each of the monster's swings targeted Shifeng's blind spots. This must be his limit. Not bad. His score should be above 70. Seeing Shifeng's HP near 0, Katie Green prepared to cast a buff. There was no doubt that the Hell Knight was strong. Even a peak, Tier 3 NPC of the same level would struggle in a fight against it, much less a Tier 2 player. She hadn't wanted to lend Shifeng a hand until now because she wanted to see how long the player would hold his ground against the Great Lord. As for her requirement for killing the Hell Knight, she had merely said that to ensure that Shifeng would fight with everything he had. Actually killing the Hell Knight would take a miracle. After all, the Hell Knight was an advanced combat servant she had obtained after plenty of trials. Every count and countess in the Black Dragon Empire longed for one themselves, but only she had control of an advanced combat servant. Just before Katie Green stopped the battle, a blue light flashed before the Hell Knight's descending greatsword. Suddenly, the Hell Knight flew through the air. Its remaining 8 ice swords shattered instantly. Golden, divine runes wrapped around Shifeng's entire body, and his aura had undergone a heaven-defying transformation. This was none other than the Heavenly Dragon's power. Shifeng hadn't intended to use Heavenly Dragon's power so soon, but the Hell Knight was far more powerful than he had expected. If he continued to hold back, he would only get himself killed. Alright, let's begin the second round. Shifeng shifted his gaze towards the Hell Knight, which had finally regained its footing, and advanced. Chapter 1443, Advanced Combat Servant. After upgrading Heavenly Dragon's breath, not only did Heavenly Dragon's power increase Shifeng's strength, but it also increased his agility. Shifeng reached the Hell Knight almost instantly, brandishing Abyssal Blade and Killing Ray as he executed Sword's Orbit. A galaxy of stars glittered around Shifeng, intertwining as they bombarded the Great Lord, which had just gotten back on its feet. Although the Hell Knight's combat standards were at the half-step refinement realm, it was a child in Shifeng's eyes. He easily grasped the monster's blind spots and attack trajectories. Surefeng could have easily dodged the Hell Knight's attacks, but he had chosen to repulse them instead. Now that he had activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his strength was slightly higher than a Grand Lord's of the same level. Hence, he was stronger than the Hell Knight. If he chose to dodge the incoming attacks, he would only reduce his opportunities to deal damage. Boom. 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 One sword light after another clashed with the Hell Knight's greatsword, the resulting impacts forcing the Great Lord back and preventing it from stabilizing its posture. After 6 consecutive attacks, the Hell Knight lost its grip on its weapon as the greatsword flew from the monster's hands. Die! Surefeng activated Flame Burst, a blinding glow enveloping his blades. He assaulted the defenseless Hell Knight with a series of devastating blows. -164,878. -331,478. -332,015. All 15 attacks found their marks, causing the Great Lord's HP decrease at a tremendous rate. In an instant, the Hell Knight had lost 20% of its HP. Meanwhile, Flame Burst's terrifyingly destructive power sent the Hell Knight crashing into the frozen, steel doors, and they shuddered upon impact. Taking advantage of the Hell Knight's incapacitated state, Surefeng hurriedly activated Lightning Edge. He couldn't normally use the attack in a high-speed battle due to Lightning Edge's 0.5-second channeling time, but the injured Hell Knight had collapsed to the ground. He had more than enough time to activate the skill. Numerous silver sword lights danced before Surefeng, forming a silver river that flowed towards the Hell Knight. -244,678. -243,167. Lightning Edge's powerful assault incapacitated the Hell Knight once more. The Great Lord was defenseless as the countless sword lights bit into its flesh. After 5 seconds, the Hell Knight only had 2/3 of its HP remaining. Despite dealing 2 successful blows, Surefeng had no intentions on relaxing his offense. The moment Lightning Edge ended, Surefeng appeared before the Hell Knight and swung the Abyssal blade down towards the Great Lord. However, the Hell Knight quickly responded. At a critical moment, it reclaimed its greatsword and used it as a shield, blocking Surefeng's blade. Unfortunately, while it had held off the Abyssal blade, it couldn't do anything about the 9 sword shadows that had appeared around it. Tier 2 skill, Shadow Blade. In the end, all 9 shadows carved into the Hell Knight, devouring the Great Lord's HP at a rate visible to the naked eye. He's overwhelmed it. Surprise flashed in Countess Katie Green's eyes as she watched Surefeng dominate her Hell Knight. She had never thought that a mere Tier 2 player of the same level could surpass her advanced combat servant. Not even she could have done so when she had been Tier 2. Soloing a Great Lord of the same level was difficult for a Tier 2 class. Great Lord's HP was simply too high. These monsters' battle recovery alone was enough to overwhelm a Tier 2 player. However, Katie Green didn't recognize Surefeng for the monster he was. Despite only being a Tier 2 player, Surefeng wielded 3 fragmented legendary items. Although none of them were weapons, their overall effects were astonishing. Moreover, the Hell Knight wasn't actually a Great Lord of the same level. After all, it only had 15 million HP. An ordinary level 57 Great Lord should have at least 40 million HP. If not for the Hell Knight's strength and high combat standards, Surefeng could have easily defeated it without a berserk skill. Now that he had activated Heavenly Dragon's power, suppressing the Hell Knight was a piece of cake. Interesting. Truly interesting. He had held back so much of his strength. Katie Green's lips curled into a smile as she watched Surefeng shave off the Hell Knight's HP. However, I'm afraid that the unstable power of a berserk skill isn't enough to defeat my Hell Knight. When the Hell Knight's HP fell to 30%, it released a sudden and deafening roar. Its silver armor shattered, causing such a powerful shockwave that even Surefeng had to step back. As the silver armor fell away, it revealed the Hell Knight's crimson skin. Surefeng also noticed dark blue, divine runes all over the Hell Knight's tough hide, radiating a daunting pressure. The green flames in the monster's eyes also turned dark blue, its chilling gaze causing Shifeng to shudder. It's gone berserk. Shifeng went on the defensive as he watched the Great Lord transform. This monster was like a completely different being compared to the Hell Knight from a second ago. Berserk? Katie Green smiled. Shaking her head, she said, "This is not some kind of berserk mode. It is merely liberating its power. I specifically make the creature wear the armor to suppress most of its power." Advanced combat servants weren't like monsters and puppets. They fought their way to victory in the black market's death arena. Servants that won 20 consecutive matches in the arena became basic combat servants, while those that won 50 consecutive matches were intermediate combat servants. A combat servant would only rise to advanced rank after winning 100 consecutive matches. Hence, combat servants were generally stronger than beings of the same tier. Needless to say, a Tier 3 advanced combat servant was extraordinarily powerful. This was why the other counts and countesses in the Black Dragon Empire wanted their own advanced combat servant. However, advanced combat servants were incredibly expensive. Everyone was a combat genius. Most nobles couldn't afford one. They generally settled for a few intermediate combat servants. After the Hell Knight removed its armor, its attributes underwent a qualitative transformation. Its rank had also increased from Great Lord to Grand Lord. Without the armor, the Hell Knight's mobility increased as well. Now, its combat standards had reached the refinement realm. I wonder how long you'll last against it. Katie Green chuckled. So far, Shifeng had displayed more strength than she had expected. He had earned 100 points in his evaluation just by forcing the Hell Knight to abandon its armor. However, this had only fed the Countess's curiosity, and she wanted to see how far this player could go. So, this is the test to obtain one of the 7 treasures. Shifeng could not help his bitter smile as he watched the Hell Knight slowly approach. Having the power to solo a Grand Lord of the same level was ridiculous. Moreover, this Grand Lord's combat standards were on par with refinement realm experts. When the Hell Knight raised its greatsword, Shifeng took in a deep breath. Come! Shouting, Shifeng activated Tier 2 Blade Liberation, his attributes skyrocketing once more. He then swung the Abyssal Blade to meet the incoming greatsword. When the two weapons collided, sparks illuminated the dark hall. The resulting shockwave sent dust and debris into the air. What? The Countess's mouth twitched when Shifeng blocked the Hell Knight's attack. He was still holding back. After the clash, the Hell Knight was forced to take 5 steps backward. In contrast, Shifeng hadn't moved an inch. He then dashed at the Grand Lord. Although Shifeng's strength wasn't as high as mythic monsters of the same level after activating twofold Berserk, he wasn't far from it. The Hell Knight, which was only a Grand Lord, was no match for him. Without using any skills, Shifeng effortlessly broke through the Hell Knight's defenses with only Sword's Orbit. As slash after slash split the Hell Knight's iron-like skin, the monster's HP plummeted. When only 1% of the Hell Knight's HP remained, a golden light enveloped the monster. The Hell Knight transformed into a stream of blue smoke that flowed back into the magic scroll in Katie Green's hands. System, congratulations. You have completed Katie Green's second test. Chapter 1444, Rewards of SSS-rank Evaluation. Following the system notification of the test's completion, Shifeng received another system notification. System, Test Evaluation, 200 points. Test Evaluation Rank, SSS rank. Rewarding 20 free mastery points, 5 legacy skill points, 300 million EXP, and Countess Katie Green's favorability increased by 30 points. It's just a test, yet it awarded so many legacy skill points. The system notification astonished Shifeng. Generally, players were lucky to get 1 or 2 legacy skill points after completing a high-rank hidden quest, yet he had received 5 points after qualifying for the quest. One could easily imagine the bountiful rewards from the quest itself. To think you would actually defeat my Hell Knight, you really are a shocking adventurer, Katie Green, who stood some distance away, said with satisfaction. I'm even more confident that you can get the item for me. Since you've passed my test, take this as a gift. Saying so, the Countess revealed a blue gemstone with a chilling aura. The moment this gemstone appeared, the already chilly temperature dropped further. The surrounding mana gathered to the stone in a frenzy, forming a vortex. Is that the Azure Source Stone? Shi Feng exclaimed when he saw the mesmerizing gemstone in Katie Green's hand. God's domain had many kinds of attribute gemstones. However, the attribute source stones were a rank above. Attribute source stones were worth thousands of gold, but unlike attribute gemstones, players could only equip one of each kind of source stone. Although attribute gemstones only increased a specific attribute source stones could increase two or more. Take the Azure Source Stone for example. Not only did it increase physique by 5% when equipped, but it also increased ice resistance by 20%. An Azure Source Stone could have easily gone for 6,000 or 7,000 gold in the past, but only a fool would sell one. Normally, one would have traded an Azure Source Stone for a piece of epic equipment with high attributes. It is, indeed. Moreover, it's an intermediate Azure Source Stone, Katie Green said, nodding. With this item, you'll have an easier time fetching my item. You don't have enough ice resistance right now to survive the area. An intermediate Azure Source Stone. Shi Feng could not believe that Katie Green was actually so generous. Attribute source stones were divided into 4 ranks: basic, intermediate, advanced, and peak. Basic attribute source stones alone were incredibly valuable. In the past, a top-tier expert would be lucky to equip 1 or 2 basic attribute source stones. Even after 10 years in God's domain, Shadow had only acquired a single intermediate attribute source stone. Unlike gemstones, one couldn't increase an attribute source stone's rank by synthesizing lower-rank stones. These treasures could only be obtained from Grade 1 Forbidden Lands. As for basic attribute source stones, they could be found in Grade 2 Forbidden Lands. Though, only dark gold treasure chests and mythic ranked bosses and above had a chance of dropping them. Yet, Katie Green was generous enough to give him an Azure Source Stone. Intermediate Azure Source Stone. Only one can be equipped at a time. Equipment requirement, level 50. All attributes plus 120. Increases physique by 8%. Increases ice resistance by 30%. The attribute bonus from one Azure Source Stone was already higher than that of top tier, level 50, dark gold equipment. Furthermore, it boosted physique and ice resistance. After receiving the intermediate Azure Source Stone, he replaced one of his tier 3 strength gemstones without hesitation. What Shi Feng didn't know was that the Countess had intended to give him the basic Azure Source Stone before he had surprised her with his performance. Not only had Shi Feng's basic attributes increased after equipping the Source Stone, but his 5 senses sharpened as well. When he had first entered the hall, he had felt slightly cold, but now he didn't feel it at all. Very good. Now, I'll send you to the Ice Crystal World. Once you're there, collect 10 eternal ice crystals for me. Bring them back, and the Bracelet of Time is yours, Katie Green explained, nodding in approval as Shi Feng relaxed, no longer affected by the room's temperature. System: you have accepted Countess Katie Green's epic ranked main storyline quest, Ice Crystal World. Quest content: collect 10 eternal ice crystals from the Ice Crystal World. Quest reward: Bracelet of Time. Why is this an epic ranked main storyline quest? A frown pulled at Shi Feng's lips when he read the system notification. Main storyline quests could significantly affect a kingdom or empire. These effects could be beneficial, but they could also be damaging. They were far more difficult than other quests of the same rank. Although the quest location wasn't a forbidden land on the God's Domain continent, the Ice Crystal World was a forbidden land. Only now did Shi Feng understand why Katie Green had told him that the higher one's tier was, the more danger they would face in the quest location. The Ice Crystal World was a world of its own and highly opposed to visiting lifeforms. The stronger the life form was, the more rejection they would face. Upon entering the world, various aspects would attempt to suppress the newcomer. At the same time, foreign life forms entering this world would possess unique auras. Meanwhile, the stronger this aura was, the easier it would be to attract the old monsters of the Ice Crystal world. Not even Tier 5 NPCs were a match for those old monsters. Tier 6 gods weren't even allowed to enter. Alright, I'll open the teleportation gate now. I can only maintain the gate for 1 or 2 seconds, so you need to be fast. Otherwise, you'll have to wait another month before I can open the gate again, Katie Green warned Shifeng. In other words, Shifeng only had one opportunity to challenge her quest. If he failed, he would have to earn 5 million magic crystals to purchase the Bracelet of Time. I understand. Shifeng nodded. Inwardly, though, he felt some contempt towards the Countess. Other players might not know what eternal ice crystals were, but he did. It was rumored that the eternal ice crystal contained eternal power. Eternal power was crucial in helping NPCs reaching Tier 6. In the past, many players with dark gold personal guards had only been able to upgrade their NPCs to Tier 5. It was due to the lack of eternal power that these guards had never crossed that final hurdle. Hence, items containing eternal power like the eternal ice crystal had been priceless in the past. One could only have traded rare materials or items of equal value for them. Yet, this woman wanted him to obtain eternal ice crystals from the ice crystal world. How could they possibly be that easy to acquire? Moreover, she wanted 10 of them. But Shifeng couldn't care less right now. Zero Wing simply wasn't equipped to collect 5 million magic crystals. He had no other choice. If he succeeded, he would obtain one of the 7 treasures, and with the golden stigmata, he could use the item better than Katie Green. Once Shifeng had prepared himself, Katie Green began to chant an incantation. Immediately, mana surged towards the shut, steel gates, slowly forcing them open. A stable, spatial tunnel formed beyond the open doors. Hurry! Katie Green shouted. Ignoring his weakened state, Shifeng activated Windwalk and jumped into the spatial tunnel, departing the icy hall. Chapter 1445, Ice Crystal World. Inside a snow-capped canyon, a party of 6 fought a level 48, High Lord ranked Ice-Toothed Tiger. Ice-Toothed Tiger, Elemental Creature, High Lord. Level 48. HP 31,000/31,000,000. A level 45 shield warrior wielding a crimson longsword and aqua-blue buckler stood before this 5-meter-tall monster, and despite its size, it was powerless against the player. Regardless of how the Ice-Toothed Tiger tried to attack the shield warrior, the latter blocked the blows and found gaps to strike, using his skills to deal 6,000 to 7,000 damage per hit. The shield warrior's party members were also quite capable. Not only were they all level 44 and above, but their skills and spells also dealt over -10,000 damage. Their normal attacks alone dealt over -3,000 damage. Everyone, the boss is almost dead. Increase your damage output. Make sure you dodge its AoE skill, the shield warrior named Solitary 9 said calmly as he blocked another of the Ice-Toothed Tiger's attacks. Commander, relax, this isn't our first time killing an Ice-Toothed Tiger, a level 44 white-clad summoner a short distance away scoffed. The rest of the party members nodded. When the Ice-Toothed Tiger's HP reached 30%, its snow-white fur turned vermilion as it went berserk. Its size and attack speed increased as well. A moment later, icicles began to rain down from the sky, covering a 50-yard radius around the Ice-Toothed Tiger. Seeing this, Solitary 9 shouted as he activated Shield Wall. He then skillfully dodged the descending icicles and focusing on defense. Despite the boost to the Ice-Toothed Tiger's strength and speed, it still couldn't break through Solitary 9's defense. In the end, all of its attacks met the shield warrior's round shield, significantly reducing its damage. At the same time, the female druid in the back waved her dark green staff as she cast Healing Wind. Although the shield warrior was her main target, the rest of her party received a healing buff, gaining over 1,500 HP every second. This kept everyone's HP above a safe level. Every player in the party launched a fierce assault. As a result, the High Lord's HP decreased rapidly. From 30%, it very quickly dropped to 15%. When the High Lord's HP reached 10%, these players launched every skill they had. When the Ice-Toothed Tiger only had 2% of its HP remaining, several scorching flame spears flew in from a distance, striking the High Lord and devouring its remaining HP. As the Ice-Toothed Tiger collapsed, it dropped 5 items. Confused, the party members turned towards the flame spear's origin. A 20-man team stood in the snow some distance away. A male elementalist wielding a Tier 2 magic scroll seemed to be its leader. This elementalist smiled at the 6 party members. "Featherwind, what is the meaning of this?" Solitary 9 demanded with an ugly expression. "What is the meaning of this?" the elementalist named Featherwind chuckled. "Isn't it obvious? I'm kill-stealing. What else would I be doing? Our guild leader admires you and has invited you and your adventurer team to join our matchless family. If you decline, the Aurora Sword adventure team will never again find any success in Cold Wind City." The female druid named Yenya growled from behind Solitary 9, "You guys are going overboard. Since Big Brother Solitary has already determined that we won't get involved with the struggle between your guilds, we won't join either side." Because of Matchless Family's harassment, their adventurer team had ventured to this deserted area to level, yet these people had followed them so far from Cold Wind City to steal their boss. "Overboard?" Featherwind laughed. "Winner takes all in this place. Now that the competition over Cold Wind City has reached its peak, our guild leader will not allow any mishaps. Of course, our guild leader highly values experts like Brother 9. If Brother 9 joins our guild, he'll at least become the lead MT for one of our main forces. Yet our guild leader has waited for so long, and still Brother 9 refuses. Since we can't recruit you, we'll make sure no one can have you. This is your last invitation. Brother 9, will you join us or not?" "You? How can you do such a thing?" Anxiety tightened Yenya's chest. The Matchless Family was one of Cold Wind City's 2 large guilds. It had plenty of experts under its command. If it really decided to move against their Aurora Sword adventurer team, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Brother 9, before you answer, think this through carefully. Otherwise, the people around you might have some unexpected accidents. Who knows? If they're not careful, they might even fall back to level 0, Featherwind threatened, smiling. Yenya and the other party members' expressions darkened. Although they were strong, Matchless Family had too many experts. If they were ambushed, they would definitely die. But they couldn't leave Cold Wind City. In the end, this merciless guild would pick them off. "Aren't you afraid that we'll just join Centurion Dynasty?" Solitary 9 asked, his tone as cold as the snow beneath his feet. One of Cold Wind City's 2 large guilds was Matchless Family, while the other was Centurion Dynasty. It was due to the competition between these guilds for control of the city that the Aurora Sword suffered. "You're free to join those bastards, of course, but don't think that you'll leave this place alive." As Featherwind finished speaking, he waves his hand. At the same time, he pulled an ancient, pitch-black scroll, which radiated a heart-rending evil, from his bag. Suddenly, over 100 players from Matchless Family began to appear around Solitary 9's party. These players had concealed their presence with a group invisibility scroll. However, the shield warrior was far more afraid of the magic scroll in Featherwind's hand than he was of the players surrounding them. "To think you even prepared a dead soul scroll. You people from Matchless Family think too highly of me," Solitary 9 said, smiling bitterly as he stared at the black scroll. The Dead Soul Scroll was a special magic scroll that could curse a target player. If the player died within a certain amount of time, their death penalty would multiply, and they would lose between 3 and 5 levels. Most guilds saved the super rare scroll for important targets. Of course. I've already told you how important you are to our guild leader. As proof, he personally ordered me to use this scroll, Featherwind said, chuckling. Well? What is your decision, Brother 9? However, as Solitary 9 contemplated his options, a black vortex appeared in the sky above him. A black shadow shot down from the vortex, landing between the Aurora Sword Party and Matchless Family's tyrants. This shadow was none other than Shifeng. This is the Ice Crystal World. Shifeng could not help but glance around him. Immediately, he discovered the players engaged in a confrontation. Every one of these players stared at him in shock. Although Shifeng had heard about the Ice Crystal World, he had never visited it. However, he wasn't surprised to find players here. After all, it wasn't unusual to find players in other worlds. Take the Dark Den for example. Despite being home to demons, many players lived there. What did surprise Shifeng were the players' levels. All of these players were at least level 44. There were even quite a few level 45 players. Who are you? Don't you realize that Matchless Family is trying to conduct business here? Featherwind haughtily demanded. Chapter 1446, Instant Kill. Hearing Featherwind's question, Shifeng turned to look at the man. Although Featherwind was a level 45 elementalist, his equipment was ordinary for his level. Only half of his equipment consisted of level 40 dark gold equipment, while the other half consisted of level 40 fine gold equipment. As for the other level 44 players, only a small number possessed 1 or 2 pieces of dark gold equipment, while most didn't even have one. It was astounding to see. At this stage of the game, at least half of the equipment worn by the various large guilds experts should be level 40 dark gold rank. It wasn't even surprising to see an expert in a full set of dark gold equipment. After all, God's Domain's mainstream players were still some distance from level 40, so the demand for better equipment wasn't that high yet. Could the drop rate for level 40 equipment be low here? Shifeng guessed. God's Domain had many other worlds. Generally, expert players started to encounter these worlds after reaching level 40. Each world had a different development model. In the Dark Den, for example, players used different play styles from those in God's Domain. Leveling up must be easier in the Ice Crystal World. In return, though, the drop rate for equipment was lacking. Shifeng glanced around him again. Although he had just arrived, he easily inferred what was going on. Banditry was common everywhere, after all. Although, large forces fighting over a measly level 48 High Lord were still considerably rare. Of course, Shifeng was more interested in the Ice-Toothed Tiger's loot than he was in the situation before him. Not a single weapon or piece of equipment lay among the boss's loot. In fact, 4 of the 5 items that had dropped were materials, while the last was a Tier 2 magic scroll. Most players would curse their bad luck for such drops, but the High Lord's loot was shockingly attractive to a master forger like Shifeng. The 4 materials were extremely valuable, and the most valuable among them was the Arctic Manatite. This treasure was even difficult to obtain from a manatite vein. A single ingot of Arctic Manatite would have sold for over 50 gold in the past. It was a necessary material for producing epic ranked weapons with ice effects. Shifeng was also surprised to find that his weakened debuff from activating twofold Berserk was gone, though his Berserk skills were still on cooldown. What? Didn't you hear what I just said? Featherwind's gaze turned frosty as he glared at Shifeng. He had only asked for the swordsman's identity due to his sudden appearance. Even with his observation skill, Shifeng's data listed as unknown. Since he was dealing with an unfamiliar player, he had mentioned his guild's name to gauge Shifeng's reaction. Matchless Family was one of Cold Wind City's 2 major guilds. Everyone in the region recognized the name. The only power capable of competing with the guild was Centurion Dynasty. However, Shifeng seemed unaffected. The man even ignored him, Matchless Family's vice-guild leader. This was the first time he had encountered this situation since joining God's Domain. Let alone Solitary 9, Aurora Sword's commander, even Sky Slicer, Centurion Dynasty's guild leader, would not dare to disregard his existence. Is this guy a fool? Or is he scared senseless? He actually dares to ignore our vice guild leader. This guy is dead. After angering our vice guild leader, he'll probably have to delete his account. Matchless Family's members watched Shifeng with ridicule and pity. They still remembered the adventurer team that had refused to leave their guild's leveling spot after Featherwind had warned them not to linger. In the end, Featherwind had led a force to slaughter the adventurer team over a dozen times. Those players had only lingered for about 10 seconds. Now, the mysterious man before them ignored Featherwind entirely. Not even the heavens could save him now. Suddenly, Solitary 9 sent Shifeng a whisper, "Friend, you best reply to his question and get out of here." He is the vice guild leader of Matchless Family. He can easily eliminate anyone in Cold Wind City. Cold Wind City. The vice guild leader of Matchless Family. Shifeng turned to Featherwind in surprise. Hearing Solitary 9's warning, he realized that this world wasn't like the Dark Denver. This world had NPC cities, and by the looks of it, this Matchless Family guild seemed to rule over Cold Wind City. However, the fact that a large guild's vice guild leader wore such poor equipment shocked Shifeng. Even the upper echelons in Star Moon Kingdom's large guilds were fully geared in level 40 dark gold equipment, much less the vice guild leaders. It seemed that the equipment standards here were far more than a little inferior to those in God's domain. It's too late for you to realize your mistake. When Featherwind saw Shifeng's surprise, he sneered and said, "I'll bury you alongside Solitary 9 and the others." Saying so, Featherwind activated the Dead Soul Scroll. Suddenly, a magic array appeared above Shifeng and the party from Aurora Sword. They all felt an evil presence wrap around them, and a special debuff appeared in their status windows. Soul Lock. Death penalty multiplied. Effect will persist after player has died. Duration, 12 hours. The Dead Soul Scroll. Surprise flashed in Shifeng's eyes once again when he saw his status window. The Dead Soul Scroll was a super rare magic scroll and the best tool to destroy an enemy. Not only did the scroll lack side effects, but it was also an AoE, which made it impossible to dodge. If players died within the 12 hours, they would suffer a far more severe death penalty than normal. Meanwhile, the more times a player died during the debuff's duration, the heavier the penalty would become. Targets weren't even safe in NPC cities, and when they logged out of the game, the duration would pause until they logged back in. Only after 12 hours in God's domain would players be free of the debuff. Hence, the Dead Soul Scrolls were even as valuable as Tier 3 summoning scrolls. Most players avoid using them unless they had a deep hatred for their target. Friend, I truly apologize for this. I did not expect to drag you into my mess with Matchless Family. I'll do my best to open a path for you. Try to escape, Solitary 9 hurriedly said. He then turned towards his teammates and said, "You guys have to try to get away, too." He was a shield warrior. He could never escape so many players without some special tool. He could only help his allies get away. Commander. Big Brother Solitary. The other 5 party members worried for their commander. They were very familiar with Solitary 9's strength. If he focused on getting away himself, he had some hope, but he had given that up to help them escape. Should Solitary 9 die, it would take a very long time to recover the lost EXP and equipment. Escape? Shifeng smiled and shook his head. He then slowly approached Featherwind. What is he trying to do? Yenya watched this newcomer in confusion. He's not trying to beg for mercy, is he? What a fool. That's Featherwind. If begging for mercy worked, he wouldn't have killed so many players in Cold Wind City. Aurora Sword's members were flabbergasted as they stared at Shifeng. Featherwind was well known for his ruthlessness in Cold Wind City. He was a vicious person that never accepted apologies. What? You want to beg for mercy? Feather Wind sneered at Shi Feng as the man moved closer. As everyone waited for the swordsman's reply, Shi Feng vanished. Where is he? Feather Wind searched his surroundings. Everyone was stunned. They had never seen a swordsman disappear like an assassin. In the next second, however, Shi Feng reappeared beside Feather Wind. Before anyone realized it, two sword lights blossomed on Feather Wind's mage robes. The man's vision darkened as his lifeless body dropped to the ground. Chapter 1447, Monster-like Mysterious Expert. Silence dominated the area as every player stared at Feather Wind's motionless corpse. Although Shi Feng had not used any impressive techniques or skill, everyone was petrified. They even forgot to breathe. What just happened? The Vice Guild leader is dead? Just what did he do? Everything had happened so quickly that by the time they reacted, Feather Wind, a top-tier expert and Matchless Family's Vice Guild leader, was already dead. He died. This is impossible. That's Feather Wind we're talking about. He might not rank among the top 10 in Cold Wind City, but he is still a top-tier expert in the top 20. How could an expert like that die so quickly? Even Lifeless Thorn, Cold Wind City's #1 expert, couldn't achieve such a feat. Could he be Lifeless Thorn? Lifeless Thorn is a berserker, that guy is a swordsman. There's no way he's Lifeless Thorn. Commander, do you know who that guy is? Even Aurora Swords members were astonished. One of Cold Wind City's top 20 experts had died in one hit. If news of this matter got out, it would shock everyone in the city. Solitary 9 stared at Shi Feng in confusion, his mind spinning to figure which expert in Cold Wind City this man was. As for the possibility of Shi Feng being from somewhere else, that was practically impossible. The only way in or out of the Cold Wind City region was through the Snow Rift, a forbidden land for players. Current players couldn't even enter the map, much less cross through it. This was why the city's players were so afraid of Matchless Family and Centurion Dynasty. Should they provoke either power, their life in Cold Wind City would become a living hell or end completely. However, no matter how Solitary 9 racked his brain, he couldn't match any of the city's experts to Shi Feng. Even Cleansing Whistle, the strongest swordsman in Cold Wind City, was only ranked 6th. Moreover, Cleansing Whistle was a woman, not a man, making it impossible for her to be the mysterious swordsman expert before him. I'm not sure either. But you should get ready. We'll use this opportunity to escape in a moment, Solitary 9 said in the team chat after pondering the situation for some time. Now that Feather Wind was dead, the 100+ experts from Matchless Family had lost their commander. Hence, they had a high likelihood of escaping. Moreover, they had an expert like Shi Feng to hold the line, which further increased their chances. Feather Wind had over 30,000 HP. Although he was an elementalist, the fact that Shi Feng had killed him without using skills meant that he could kill an MT of the same level with a handful of attacks. If Shi Feng's attack speed was high enough, he could even finish off an MT before the enemy healers could react. As long as no one could pin the swordsman down, their party could safely retreat. Suddenly, Matchless Family's members snapped out of their daze. Their leader had died, yet they had stared blankly at the killer for so long. They all discarded their fear and pounced on Shi Feng. Die! Brat, you're dead. You dare kill our Vice Guild leader. From today on, we'll hunt you to the end of the world. The Matchless Family's experts charged at Shi Feng. They were so focused on killing the newcomer that they ignored Aurora Swords members. They all understood that if news of this reached Cold Wind City, they could kiss their lives goodbye. If they let Shi Feng escape after killing Feather Wind in front of them, what hope did they have of mingling in Cold Wind City? Fireballs, frost arrows, and arrows flew towards Shi Feng from all directions. Watching from a distance, Solitary 9's expression darkened. Not even a shield warrior like himself could block so many attacks at a time. He'd be lucky to block 60 or 70% of the attacks. If dozens of attacks hit him at once, he'd only last a few seconds even with shield wall active. However, a galaxy of stars suddenly formed around Shifeng. These stars crushed the various spells and arrows as they came within 10 yards of the swordsman. It was as if the stars had formed a magic barrier around Shifeng. No matter how many attacks flew towards Shifeng, none of them hit their mark. In fact, the bombardment hadn't even reduced Shifeng's HP by a single point. What kind of skill is that? Every player watching was stupefied. Meanwhile, after Shifeng had deflected a volley, Matchless Family's dozens of melee players moved in to strike. Charge. Chop. Shadow Assault. Flame Slash. One skill after another collided with Shifeng's sword's orbit. Peng. 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 The moment these melee players encountered sword's orbit, they were thrown backward like cannonballs. Some nearly lost their grip on their weapons from the powerful impact. Moreover, these melee players had lost a visible chunk of their HPs. Even the Guardian Knights and Shield Warriors lost over 2000 HP, and they had only received the damage from assaulting Shifeng with their shields. The other classes lost around 4000 HP. 4000 damage would even reduce an MT's HP by 1/10. How is this possible? Solitary 9 and his companions watched, dumbfounded. Don't be afraid of this trash. We have healers to recover our HP. I refuse to believe his skill can last forever, a member from Matchless Family shouted to his team. The other members nodded in response. They eyed Shifeng from the sidelines, waiting until the duration of whatever skill he was using came to an end. What? You don't want to play anymore? Shifeng shook his head and chuckled when he saw his opponent's hesitation. Since you won't come to me, I'll come to you. He had simply focused on defense to get a better idea of these players' combat standards. He had only instant-killed Feather Wind to instill shock and fear into these players. Now that the enemy commander was dead, the remaining 100+ experts were little more than test subjects to help him understand players' standards in the Ice Crystal world. Following which, Shifeng advanced and instantly appeared before a level 44 Shield Warrior, the sacred sword in his hand smoothly descending from an angle that the Shield Warrior couldn't evade. So fast. The Shield Warrior raised his shield in a panic. At the same time, his feet also unconsciously took a step back. The instant killing ray met the fine gold-ranked shield, it left a scar in the metal, and the resulting impact threw the player over a dozen yards away. The Shield Warrior's HP fell by over 2400. Following which, Shifeng brandished his swords at the nearby MTs. Without exception, he sent every MT flying. Monster. He isn't a player. He's a monster. Matchless Family's members were petrified as they watched Shifeng toss about their MTs. Normally, they were lucky to land blocked attacks that dealt over -100 damage during duels with these MTs, yet they received over -2000 damage from Shifeng's attacks. It was easy to imagine how horrifying the man's damage would be if they failed to block an attack. It seems the Ice Crystal World's players don't just have inferior equipment, but their combat standards are lower than players in God's domain as well. After clashing with Matchless Family's members several times, Shifeng gained a general understanding of these players' combat standards. Following which, he stabbed the Abyssal blade into the ground and glanced at the frightened players before him, saying, "My experiment is over. Let's start the real battle." Abyssal Curse. Skywheel Sword. Suddenly, a dark fog bound every player within 30 yards of Shifeng. As these players tried to activate their control removal skills, countless divine swords descended from above. Shifeng then followed up with Killing Ray's Summon Lightning, dealing 400% lightning damage to all enemies within a 15-yard radius. In the blink of an eye, almost every player within Summon Lightning's range turned to ash and disappeared, leaving weapons and equipment scattered across the battlefield. Only a few MTs and the players who had fled the attack's radius had survived. Chapter 1448, Shocking Cold Wind City. Who is he? An expert like this guy was hidden in Cold Wind City all this time. The Aurora Sword's party members, who had been about to flee, were stupefied by the scene before them. They had never seen such a massive gap between players' strength. Even Zerg tactics would crumble against Shurfeng. A second ago, over 100 players from Matchless family had Shurfeng surrounded. Now, however, only a dozen or so players were still standing. These players were only alive because they had reacted quickly enough, activating their life-saving skills upon realizing the severity of the situation. Otherwise, they, too, would have been electrocuted and turned to ash with their dead companions. Monster! Run! No one knew which player had shouted, but upon hearing the word run, every surviving Matchless family member turned and fled as if a pistol had gone off to sign the start of some race. They all knew that if they fled as a group, none of them would get away, but Shurfeng couldn't catch them all if they ran in different directions. However, contrary to expectations, Shurfeng didn't immediately run after the feeling players. He simply sheathed his 2 swords and activated Chilling Field. Chilling Field covered a 50-yard radius. Upon activation, the skill enveloped every fleeing player. 9 dark gray swords appeared above the guild players. As Matchless family's members focused on escape, they did not manage to react to the incoming attacks in time. As a result, the dark gray swords pierced their hearts with 0 resistance, plundering the little HP they had remaining. After 2 waves of attacks, the last of Matchless family's players transformed into particles of white light and disappeared, leaving only weapons and equipment in their places. Is he really a swordsman? Solitary 9 was thunderstruck as he watched the instantaneous slaughter. Among the dozen or so survivors, the closest had been 20 yards from Shurfeng, while the farthest had been over 35 yards away, yet even from such a distance, Shurfeng obliterated them effortlessly. With such attack capabilities, could anyone escape this man's wrath? Solitary 9's party members stared at Shurfeng, shock and fear dancing in their eyes. Although they had encountered plenty of experts before, they had never felt so powerless before one. It had taken Shurfeng only a few moves to wipe out over 100 experts from Matchless family. When they had first seen the swordsman, they hadn't thought much of him. However, chills crawled down their spines as they watched Shurfeng calmly collect the loot littering the snowy ground. It was as if the thing walking towards them was some prehistoric beast, not a player. As Shurfeng collected the dropped weapons and equipment, each item surprised him more than the last. Only a small fraction of the loot was system-made. Most of the weapons and equipment were crafted items. The lowest rank among these items was Secret Silver, while the highest quality items were Dark Gold rank. Every weapon and piece of equipment was level 40. Currently, even Zero Wing's prided Candlelight trading firm could only mass-producing level 40 mysterious iron weapons and equipment. Only the top-ranking lifestyle players were capable of crafting level 40 fine gold weapons and equipment. Moreover, they could only craft a limited amount. One of the reasons for the low production volume was material rarity. Another reason was the low success rate, which resulted in high production costs. Rather than waste time trying to procure rare materials, most players simply purchased their weapons and equipment in the auction house. The fact that the majority of the weapons and equipment Matchless family's members had dropped were player-made was inconceivable. The development of weapon and equipment production on God's Domain's continent was already quite fast, yet it was nothing compared to Ice Crystal World. While Shurfeng collected the scattered items, Solitary 9 took the initiative to approach the man. Friend, thank you for earlier. If not for you, Matchless family's members would have killed us. I am Solitary 9, the commander of the Aurora Sword Adventurer team. Solitary 9 introduced himself. If you have any problems in Cold Wind City, please feel free to contact me. Although Aurora Sword wasn't one of Cold Wind City's top adventurer teams, it was relatively well known. The team had over 100 members in total, and although they were strong enough to make major changes in the city, they could deal with minor issues. The other party members nodded eagerly. They both feared and revered Shurfeng. If they spread the news about what had happened here, it would cause chaos in Cold Wind City. Matchless family was a peerless organization in Cold Wind City, yet Shurfeng had slaughtered over 100 of its experts by himself. He was a monster-like existence. Countless players dreamed of befriending an expert like him. Cold Wind City. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng asked, "Can you tell me a little about the situation in Cold Wind City?" He had practically no understanding of the ice crystal world, let alone any clues leading to eternal ice crystals. Now that Katie Green had sent him here, if he did not acquire the required eternal ice crystals within a month, he would have a far more difficult time obtaining the Bracelet of Time. The first thing he needed to do was learn about the situation here. Once he did, he'd have an easier time searching for the eternal ice crystals. Tell you about Cold Wind City. Solitary 9 was taken aback. He quickly recovered from his surprise and asked, "Could it be that you're not a player from this region?" The others were similarly dumbfounded. Everyone knew that unless one crossed the snow rift, it was impossible to leave or enter the Cold Wind City region. "That's right. I'm not from this area." Shifeng nodded, feeling no particular need to hide the truth. After all, players in other worlds didn't always stay there. As they reached higher levels, the system would gradually integrate them into the rest of the game. Besides, it's not like they could do anything about his origin. Realization dawned Solitary 9 and the others. It was no wonder why they had never seen a monster like Shifeng in Cold Wind City. However, Solitary 9 and his companions couldn't help their rueful sighs. Solitary 9 was one of the top 3 MTs in Cold Wind City. He should rank near the top in other regions as well, but they had never imagined that other regions would have experts like this swordsman. It was easy to surmise that the expert standards in other regions were much higher than in Cold Wind City. This revelation was a mental blow. At the same time, though, they were eager to leave their city and explore other maps. Only, Solitary 9 and the others did not know that Shifeng was not from a different region in the ice crystal world. Rather, he had come from God's Domain's continent. Even in his home region, Shifeng only ranked among the top 100 on the God's Domain experts list. Following which, Solitary 9 explained some basic details and the general situation in Cold Wind City. Meanwhile, an uproar shook Cold Wind City. Matchless Family's failed attempt to annihilate the Aurora Sword Adventurer team had already reached the public. Not only had the guild member failed to kill a single player from the group, but hundreds of its experts had also been eliminated by some passing swordsman. Chapter 1449, Becoming Famous in Cold Wind City. Cold Wind City, Matchless Family's guild residence. Over a dozen upper echelons occupied the residence's meeting room, an extraordinarily tense atmosphere. A middle-aged man on the guild leader's throne was the cause for this tension. This middle-aged man wore a suit of azure armor. Although he said nothing, the pressure he radiated chilled the room. Even a passing glance from this man felt like that of some ferocious beast. This middle-aged man was none other than Thundering Sky, Matchless Family's guild leader. In Cold Wind City, one word from him could easily decide whether a player lived or died. Right now, Thundering Sky's blood boiled with rage. "Can someone tell me where this person came from?" Thundering Sky frowned as he watched Shifeng's battle video. "It's been so long since the incident, yet none of you know anything about him." "Guild leader, we've launched a full investigation on the player. However, we have yet to uncover any information about him," one of the upper echelons answered, cold sweat chilling his forehead. Immediately after Feather Wind died, the Elementalist had sent them an offline message, ordering them to focus all of their resources on investigating Shifeng. However, no matter how hard they searched, they found nothing about the swordsman. It was as if the man had suddenly appeared. "This player has already killed over 100 of our members, but we don't even know his name." "Garbage. Every one of you." Thundering Sky bellowed. "Continue searching. Mobilize everyone. I want this person found. Since he dares to disrespect Matchless Family, then he shouldn't even dream of surviving in Cold Wind City." "Understood." Everyone nodded and notified the guild's members to search for the swordsman. For a time, every member of Matchless Family hunted for Shifeng, killing intent igniting their hearts. Centurion Dynasty also held a meeting to discuss the situation. Interesting. Truly interesting. That person actually annihilated Featherwind's expert team. I don't think even Lifeless Thorn could do that, Sky Slicer, Centurion Dynasty's guild leader, said, laughing as he watched Shifeng's battle video. Matchless Family had been humiliated. Not only had the guild failed to kill Solitary 9, but it had also lost over 100 experts. Most importantly, a single player was responsible for all 100+ deaths. This had dealt a huge blow to Matchless Family's reputation. After all, winning a 1-on-5 expert battle was impressive. Even an expert like Lifeless Thorn should only be able to handle a dozen or so experts at a time. Yet, Shifeng had faced over 100 experts, and his victory had been overwhelming. Naturally, anyone who watched Shifeng's battle video would realize that the man was very powerful. However, those who had only heard about the massacre would assume that Matchless Family's experts were nothing but paper tigers. Suddenly, a female elementalist in white mage robes asked, "Guild leader, what should we do next?" "Since the Matchless Family wants to kill this player, we have to do the opposite," Sky Slicer said, laughing. "Rain, find him. Tell him that the Centurion Dynasty would like to welcome him with open arms." "What if he refuses?" Swirling Rain asked. "Refuses?" Sky Slicer snorted. "That's not an option. We're talking about Matchless Family, after all. Even if he is strong as an individual, he can't take on the whole guild. He'll only be safe if he joins us." "Understood." Swirling Rain then bowed and left the meeting room. Both of Cold Rain City's large guilds began their search for Shifeng. Meanwhile, the city's players were dumbfounded. "What's going on? This person is awesome." Both large guilds are actually offering a high price for information about his whereabouts. Not even Lifeless Thorn has ever elicited such a reaction. There's no helping it. Although Lifeless Thorn doesn't belong to any guild, his adventurer team, Waveheart, is a top adventurer team with over 3,000 members. It has over 300 experts. 3 of the city's top 10 experts belong to the adventurer team, as well. The guilds would have to weigh their options seriously before moving against Lifeless Thorn. That's right. This player is doomed. He killed so many of Matchless Family's players. The guild won't rest until they kill him back to level 0. Both guilds are offering such a high price. They're already offering 2 gold for any information about the man's current location. The independent players on Cold Wind City's streets quietly discussed the new player, every one of them admiring Shifeng's courage. In Cold Wind City, no one, aside from Centurion Dynasty, dared to provoke Matchless Family. Independent players often resented the 2 large guilds. Unfortunately, since both guilds were so powerful, they had no choice but to endure their suffering. Hence, when they had heard the news of Shifeng slaughtering over 100 experts from Matchless Family, they quietly celebrated. As the city's players chatted about the recent events, 7 players arrived in the teleportation hall. These players were none other than Shifeng and the party from Aurora Sword. After Solitary 9 had offered a general explanation of Cold Wind City, Shifeng had decided to pay the city a visit. Hence, Solitary 9 had given Shifeng a few return scrolls for Cold Wind City so that he could return via teleportation alongside his people. Cold Wind City was the only NPC city in this particular zone. The city's player population exceeded 2 million, and each of the large guilds had over 100,000 members. It was why the 2 guilds were able to rule over Cold Wind City. If Shifeng wanted to find more information about the Eternal Ice Crystals, Cold Wind City's library was undoubtedly the best place to do so. All of God's Domain's libraries collected information about their home locations. As soon as Shifeng's group left the teleportation hall, gasps erupted from the players outside of the building. Crap! Isn't that the expert that killed the Matchless Family's experts? What? Does he not know that the guilds have mobilized their forces to find him? He must be insane. He actually ventured into the city. Does he think Matchless family is afraid of attacking him within the city walls? That might be the case. Unfortunately, he's underestimated the guild. Some time ago, some guy had provoked a few of Matchless family's members. In the end, they killed him over 10 times inside the city. The matter was only resolved after he paid the guild 10 gold and every weapon and piece of equipment he had. Quick! Notify Matchless family. These players were stupefied as they watched Shifeng stroll down the street, admiring the scenery. From time to time, Shifeng even entered a shop to browse its merchandise. After so recently provoking Matchless family, this man dared to show his face in Cold Wind City. From a certain perspective, Shifeng deserved to be called Cold Wind City's #1 player. Shortly after Shifeng's arrival, news reached both large guilds. What? He's shopping in the trade area. Are you sure? Sky Slicer could not help his shock upon hearing the latest report. I'm absolutely sure. I've compared his face to the person in the video, the assassin confirmed, nodding seriously. I'll head there immediately. Notify the main force members and tell them to gather in the trade area as soon as possible. Sky Slicer hurriedly instructed after digesting the information. Meanwhile, in Matchless family's residence, when Thundering Sky received the news of Shifeng's appearance, he nearly shattered his desk. Daring bastard. After killing my subordinates, he still dares show his face. Notify every expert in the guild and tell them to hurry over. Halt all operations and quests temporarily. Thundering Sky bellowed. Chapter 1450, City of Crafters. Cold Wind City, Trade Area. Commander, more people are tailing us now. Matchless families probably found out about our return already. Should we notify Big Brother Yifeng about? Yenya asked worriedly as she glanced at the players stalking them. News of the slaughter of Matchless family's members had already spread throughout the city. Yet, now, the main culprit boldly walked down the city streets without a care in the world. It was a slap in the face to the guild. Once the Matchless family's members arrived, they would not leave without a fight. Thousands of players from Matchless City resided in the city. Killing a single player would be child's play for the guild. Furthermore, their group still had the Soul Lock debuff. Solitary 9 nodded in response to Yenya's question. Based on his understanding of Matchless family, the guild would seek revenge for the smallest of grievances. It wouldn't hesitate to take action against Shifeng even in the city. Although he trusted in Shifeng's strength, Matchless family had the home ground advantage. Regardless of how powerful the man was, he was at a disadvantage. Solitary 9 walked up to Shifeng and whispered, Brother Yifeng, why don't we head to the library? I'm afraid that if we linger around here any longer, Matchless family's members will find us. Dealing with them will be troublesome. Troublesome? Curious, Shifeng asked, do players have full power over the city? Solitary 9 hadn't gone into the management style in the Ice Crystal World's NPC cities. If these cities were like the Dark Den's shelters, where players had full authority to determine a city's rules, they would indeed have some trouble to deal with. That's not the case. Matchless family just has a lot of members inside the city, Solitary 9 said, shaking his head. Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Solitary 9's reply. He then pointed at the Cold Wind auction house a short distance away and said, that's all right, then. I've already visited most of the shops, so let's make a trip to the auction house before we head to the library. This, Solitary 9 was speechless. The man even wondered if Shifeng understood what he meant by, a lot of members. Cold Wind City was the Matchless family's main headquarters. The guild could easily gather over 10,000 players at a moment's notice. Centurion Dynasty was the only existence capable of contending with the guild in the city. Commander, what should we? Forget it. We'll just accompany him until the end. Hopefully, Thundering Sky can keep his cool and avoid doing anything rash. As Solitary 9 watched Shifeng leisurely approach the auction house, he struggled with various complex feelings. He could not understand what was going through Shifeng's mind. However, since Shifeng had saved his and his teammates' lives, he could not escape by himself. He could only pray that Matchless family did not do anything too reckless. After all, they were currently standing in the heart of the city. Patrolling NPC guards were everywhere. If it really came down to a fight, Matchless family would not have too much of an advantage either. Upon entering the auction house's main hall, the sight of players hawking their items greeted Shifeng. Selling cheap, top-tier level 40 fine gold weapons. 10 gold per item. Get a 5% discount if you buy 2. Selling refined meteorite copper for 3 gold per stack. Selling frost steel ore for 1 gold per stack. The players selling items in the hall outnumbered the shopping players. The items these players were selling shocked Shifeng. On the God's Domain continent, even the cheapest level 40 fine gold weapon could sell for 15 gold or more, yet players here were offering the same for 10 gold each. Moreover, they were all player-made weapons. With how high current demand was for level 40 fine gold weapons in his world, he could easily turn a massive profit if he bought and resold these player-made weapons. As for the refined meteor copper, the rare forging material currently sold for 30 silver per ingot. Moreover, it was very difficult to purchase. Each stack, containing 20 ingots, sold for 6 gold, yet these players were selling each stack for half that. The various forging materials sold in the hall were all significantly cheaper than those in God's domain. In addition, this world had an abundance of forging resources. Even empires famous for producing ores paled in comparison to the ice crystal world. This place is really impressive. It's a pity that I don't have a way to return once I leave. I guess I have no choice but to stock up on rare materials before I depart. Shifeng sighed ruefully as he looked through the various items these players offered. If he could travel between the Ice Crystal world and the God's Domain continent, he could earn more income from reselling items than what he earned from Stone Forest Town. Moreover, he could rely on the large quantity of materials to nurture the candlelight trading firm's forgers. If luck would have it, he might nurture a few master forgers. After all, creating new items required experimentation with various materials. With so many rare materials in the Ice Crystal world, one could experiment to their heart's content. This was most likely the reason that the standard of Cold Wind City's forgers was far above those in the Candlelight trading firm. Based on Solitary Nine's explanation, the Ice Crystal world should have other NPC cities. As players reached higher levels, Cold Wind City's guilds began to prepare to challenge the Snow Rift. It was only a matter of time before Cold Wind City's players encountered cities in other regions. At this point, Shifeng suspected that the Ice Crystal world had birthed the game's first master forger. However, purchasing a large amount of materials required a lot of coins, but he hadn't been carrying many when he had come to the Ice Crystal world. His only option was to make money by selling the Matchless family's secret silver and fine gold items for a low price. Unfortunately, the dark gold items were precious to Zero Wing, so Shifeng intended to hold on to them for now. After Shifeng finished putting the loot from Matchless family up for sale, he left the auction house and made his way to the library. Seeing Shifeng finally willing to leave this risky location, Solitary Nine and the others breathed a sigh of relief. However, as soon as they left the auction house, they were greeted by a shocking scene. Players crowded the street, and every one of them wore Matchless family's guild emblem. With a rough glance, they easily counted over 10,000 players. Matchless family's members radiated killing intent as they glared at Shifeng's group, scaring off any unrelated players. What's going on? Does Matchless family plan to monopolize the auction house? You don't know. Some expert killed a bunch of their members. They've come to deal with him. Do they need to go to such lengths, though? Why would they dispatch so many people just for one player? The domineering display frightened the independent players on the street. Among the Matchless family members present, the lowest leveled member was level 43. Their equipment was awe-inspiring, as well. Has the Matchless family lost its mind? Solitary Nine felt an unprecedented pressure. He had thought that, At most, Matchless family would send around 1,000 experts. He hadn't expected Thundering Sky to be mad enough to dispatch a 10,000-man army. Not even Lifeless Thorn, Cold Wind City's #1 expert, could elicit such a reaction. However, after Matchless family's members had gathered in front of the auction house, another commotion shook the street. Another player army slowly approached from the other end of the street, and although this army was smaller than Matchless family's, it still included around 3,000 players. These new arrivals wore Centurion Dynasty's guild emblem. For a time, experts from both of Cold Wind City's large guilds stood before the auction house's entrance. Following which, both guilds' leaders pulled away from the crowd. Both men looked at Shifeng. "You're the expert that killed Featherwind?" Thundering Sky and Sky Slicer asked in almost perfect unison. The spectating players were stupefied. Chapter 1451, Obliterated. That guy is so amazing. Both guild leaders actually came looking for him. Just who is he? The distant spectating players were shocked to see the two men. Solitary 9, who stood behind Shifeng, was at a loss for words. Both Thundering Sky and Sky Slicer were top-tier existences in Cold Wind City. Normally, they were very difficult to meet, yet these two had gathered here due to Shifeng. "That's right. What business do you have with me?" Shifeng calmly replied to the guild leader's question. An army of 10,000 players might be shocking to ordinary players, but not even a million-player army could surprise Shifeng. Besides, they were still inside an NPC city. "Good. I never thought you would have the guts to admit it." Thundering Sky's face twitched in anger as he glared at Shifeng's calm composure. "I am Thundering Sky, the guild leader of Matchless family. Since you admitted to killing my guild's experts, that makes things simple. Hand over every item and piece of equipment you have and let me kill you once, then we'll consider the matter settled. Otherwise, bear the consequences at your own risk." "Guild leader, aren't you letting this brat off too lightly?" The guild leader's demand confused his upper echelons. They had assumed that Thundering Sky wouldn't rest until he forced this newcomer to delete his account. He had just offered to let Shifeng off with such a light punishment. "Enough. I have my reasons." Thundering Sky shot his subordinates a withering glare, immediately silencing them. What these guild upper echelons did not know was that Thundering Sky was far more interested in Shifeng's weapons and equipment than he was in avenging Featherwind. After watching the swordsman's battle video, he realized that the man's basic attributes were ridiculously high. Not even Thundering Sky was confident of killing Featherwind in one hit. After all, Featherwind's weapons and equipment were considerably good. The Elementalist's HP was also over 30,000. PvP battles were different from those with monsters. A player's damage would scale down when they struck another player. Killing expert players of the same level was very difficult. Yet, Shifeng had done it. Moreover, he had thrown level 44 and 45 shield warriors with his normal attacks. His strength could definitely rival that of a great lord of the same level. With such powerful attributes, Shifeng had to have more than one top-tier weapon or piece of equipment. He might even have something Thundering Sky could use. However, if they killed this man while the Soul Lock debuff was active, Shifeng would only drop a few pieces of equipment. On the off chance that he had stored his items in the bank, they would lose any chance of obtaining them. Ha ha ha. Fellow friend, ignore this man's foolish demands. If you join Centurion Dynasty, I guarantee that no harm will come to you within the Cold Wind City region, Sky Slicer said as he sent a contemptuous glance at Thundering Sky before turning back to Shifeng. "In addition, I'd like to offer you the position as our guild's main force vice commander." Insane. This is madness. I didn't hear wrong, right? Sky Slicer actually offered so much to an unknown expert. They haven't even been that generous to Lifeless Thorn. Sky Slicer's voice had been quite loud, so the spectating crowd had heard every word. The offer confused them. A guild's main force was a guild's core of power. The main force generally only answered to the guild leader, not even vice-guild leaders had the authority to mobilize the main force. Hence, the main force's commander was even more important than the vice-guild leader. Although the vice-commander wasn't as important, it was still a crucial role. Sky Slicer had offered Shifeng such an important position right off the bat. Slicer. Do you intend to make an enemy of Matchless family? Thundering Sky shouted, enraged. Although he had expected Sky Slicer to oppose him, he hadn't expected the man to be so brazen about it. Have our guilds ever been friendly? Sky Slicer sneered. Their two guilds had fought countless battles against each other, and neither feared their rival. Now that he had an opportunity to suppress his rival's momentum and recruit a powerful expert, he couldn't miss the chance to kill two birds with one stone. Good. I'll take care of your Centurion dynasty as well. Thundering Sky's expression darkened. Immediately, he commanded, everyone, attack. Yes. Let's see who is afraid of whom. Sky Slicer also commanded his guild members to fight. For a time, the Matchless family and Centurion dynasty's members slaughtered each other inside the city. Due to so many players involved, the NPC patrols couldn't quell the incident quickly. They could only clear out the fighting players, little by little. Both guilds' members fought with everything they had, fully intent on annihilating their enemy. Now that players were reaching higher levels, it was only a matter of time before they could raid the Snow Rift. To compete with guilds in other NPC cities, they first needed to deal with Cold Wind City's problems. Otherwise, they would have to face enemies on both fronts. The entire street had transformed into a battlefield. Spells and arrows blotted out the sky, and explosions and screams filled the air. Unfortunately, as Centurion Dynasty had brought fewer members, Matchless family quickly suppressed its players. As a result, the former guild's members were forced to retreat. Of course, Matchless family couldn't eliminate their rivals' members as Centurion Dynasty's reinforcements began to arrive. All Matchless family could do was push the other guild back. Shortly after the battle had begun, the dead players' weapons and equipment littered the street. Even experts were forced to use their life-saving skills. The weaker players died before they could even react as numerous attacks struck. The spectators were stunned. This fight helped them realize just how weak an individual was compared to a guild. Even the well-known adventurer teams were nothing. Very quickly, Sky Slicer was forced into a corner. Meanwhile, Matchless family's members surrounded the auction house. Humph. Do you think that we can't touch you just because Centurion Dynasty wants to lend a helping hand? Thundering Sky sneered at Shifeng, who had not participated in the battle. I guarantee you that no one can protect you in the Cold Wind City region. If you hand over all of your weapons and equipment now, I can still let you off the hook. If you try to retaliate, I'll eliminate you, Solitary 9, and his group hiding behind you. The watching crowd gasped when they heard Thundering Sky's threat. They all knew that Thundering Sky was a man of his word, but they hadn't expected him to be ruthless enough to target Solitary 9's group as well. However, as soon as Thundering Sky finished speaking, Shifeng, who had maintained a relaxed posture, unsheathed Killing Ray. He then casually walked towards Thundering Sky, who stood 50 yards away from him, as if he were just taking a stroll through his own backyard. What? He actually dares to defy Thundering Sky? Is he insane? Even Matchless family's members were stunned. Setting aside Thundering Sky's individual prowess, the man was surrounded by hundreds of his experts. These subordinates would likely kill the swordsman before he got close to their guild leader. You asked for this. Thundering Sky frowned. He hadn't thought this newcomer would be so foolish. He gestured with a hand and ordered, kill him. The instant Shifeng was within the ranged player's reach, over 100 spells and arrows flew towards him, forming a tight wall that left no room for Shifeng to dodge. However, Shifeng raised the sacred sword and swung it forward. Lightning Edge. Suddenly, countless arcs of blue lightning streaked towards the incoming spells and arrows. In the blink of an eye, the lightning destroyed everything in a 50-yard cone. I am only one person. However, you can't just kill me because you want to, Surefeng calmly stated as he watched Thundering Sky and his numerous subordinates transform into particles of white light. Chapter 1452, Overwhelming Difference. Silence. It seemed as if time had stopped. The fighting players from both guilds froze as they stared at the particles of light that had once been Thundering Sky and his subordinates. All of a sudden, a large, empty space had opened on the crowded street. Even now, faint arcs of electricity flickered around the clearing. In a single move, Surefeng had killed hundreds of Matchless Family's players. Thundering Sky, who ranked among Cold Wind City's top 10 players, had died before their eyes. He hadn't even put up the slightest fight before he had died. It was hard to believe that an ordinary-looking swordsman with a blue longsword had been responsible for this. When Solitary 9 and the others, who stood behind Surefeng, saw this, they could not help but gasp, the corners of their lips twitching slightly. They already knew that Surefeng was very powerful, but it now seemed that Surefeng hadn't taken his fight with Featherwind seriously. Just who is this guy? The corners of Sky Slicer's eyes twitched as he stared at the empty clearing a short distance away. He wouldn't have been so surprised if Surefeng had been a magical class player. However, this was the first time he had seen a swordsman in God's domain possessing such a powerful skill. Moreover, this skill had such a short channeling time, giving the skill's targets no time to react. How is this possible? The guild leader died. Matchless Family's members were at a loss. Everything had happened too quickly. He killed our guild leader. We can't let him get away. That skill must have a long cooldown. He can't use it again anytime soon. Kill him. Suddenly, Matchless Family's members turned their attention away from Centurion Dynasty as they charged at Surefeng. A guild leader was directly connected to the guild's reputation. The fact that this man had killed their guild leader instantly humiliated every one of them. If they did not kill Surefeng right now, Matchless Family's reputation would suffer. This would severely impact their guild's development. Damn it! Matchless Family's players have lost their minds. Tension gripped Solitary 9 as he watched the players swarm towards him. However, before the Matchless Family's members reached their group, Surefeng pointed Killing Ray at the approaching crowd. Dragon Breath. Suddenly, a beam of white light shot forth. The white light vaporized any player it touched. In the blink of an eye, several hundred more players had died. After using Dragon Breath, Surefeng followed up with Dragon's Authority, inflicting the Fear debuff on all enemies within a 50-yard radius, reducing their movement speed and attack speed by 40% for 1 minute. Everyone within the skill's range felt as if they had plunged into a muddy swamp. Following which, Surefeng activated Defensive Blade, increasing his attack range. He then took a step forward and vanished. Where is he? As the crowd recovered from the shock and fear Surefeng's Dragon Breath had inflicted, the man had disappeared. They could not help their growing confusion. However, before anyone had realized it, Surefeng had reappeared among Matchless Family's members. He lightly swung his 2 swords at the nearby enemies. Boom! A tornado formed around Surefeng. Following which, all players within 15 yards of Surefeng collapsed, staring at their empty HP bars in a daze. Not even the MTs with high HP had escaped Surefeng's wrath. Following which, Surefeng advanced once again. This time, however, he didn't execute void steps. Instead, he left numerous afterimages trailing behind him as he moved forward. At the same time, he brandished his swords without a care in the world, slaughtering every player that came within 15 yards. None of the players within his range escaped death's embrace. In fact, they couldn't even block or dodge the swordsman's attacks. One after another, Matchless Family's members transformed into particles of light. Surefeng looked like a god of death as he claimed these players' lives. Nobody could even slow him down. Although the guild's ranged players tried to stop Surefeng, their attempts were little more than a joke. They couldn't even keep up with Shifeng's movements with their eyes, much less land and attack. They could only watch as particles of light floated in the air. He can't be a player. He must be a demon in disguise. He's a monster. A monster in human skin. We need to run. After a brief moment, Shifeng had killed another several hundred players. Panic overwhelmed matchless family members as they watched Shifeng reap their allies' lives. At this point, they had forgotten about avenging their guild leader and restoring their guild's reputation. They could only think of getting as far away from Shifeng as possible. They had never seen such a terrifying player before. Compared to Shifeng, the strongest boss monster they had ever faced looked cute. After all, they had some hope of damaging a boss. Against Shifeng, however, they couldn't even resist. How was this supposed to be a PvP battle? This was just a one-sided massacre. Like frightened rats, the thousands of matchless family members scattered and fled in all directions. The players watching from a safe distance were stupefied. Before today, they had seen thousands of players pursue a single person. They had never watched one player chase after a 10,000-man army. This scene had shattered everything they had thought they knew about God's domain. Isn't he a little too strong? Just who is he? Solitary 9 was beyond shocked. An individual having the power to suppress an entire guild only ever happened in his dreams, yet he watched as that dream became a reality. What Solitary 9 did not know was that, while Cold Wind City's players might be stronger than those in God's domain as forgers, their weapons and equipment were nothing in comparison. To prove this point, not one player from Matchless family dropped an epic weapon or piece of equipment. The best they had was level 40 dark gold equipment. On the other hand, Shifeng wielded 3 fragmented legendary items. He was also a tier 2 player. With both advantages, the difference between Shifeng and his opponents was horrifying. As the other players from Aurora Sword watched Shifeng's massacre, an indescribable excitement bloomed in their chests. They were fully aware that Shifeng was a player. They fully intended to boast to their friends that they had met such a powerful expert. After around 30 seconds, the originally clogged street was empty of players. Only Shifeng and a bunch of weapons and equipment remained. The survivors from Matchless family had long since fled the battlefield. Despite so many items covering the street, none of the spectators moved forward to steam them. On the contrary, they distanced themselves from the loot, making sure that at least 100 yards lay between them and the nearest item. As for the NPC guards, they spared Shifeng little more than a glance before pursuing Matchless family's surviving members. In NPC cities, the NPC guards would target the side that attacked first. Matchless family members had teamed up before surrounding Shifeng. If any member of the team attacked, they would implicate the entire team in the crime. Hence, within a fixed amount of time, Shifeng could kill as many members of the team as he wanted without receiving any punishment from the system. Even if this mechanic hadn't existed, Shifeng could have simply found a secluded location and altered his appearance with the demon mask. With Nightwalker Cape's passive concealment effect, not even high-tiered NPC guards could touch him. After crushing Matchless family members, Shifeng didn't hurry to collect his loot. Instead, he smiled as he turned to Sky Slicer, who stood a short distance away, saying, "Guild Leader Slicer, now that the problem has been dealt with, may I know what business you have with me?" Chapter 1453, Unexpected Harvest. Chapter 1453, Unexpected Harvest. As Centurion Dynasty's members watched Shifeng walk towards them, their breath caught, and cold sweat drenched their backs. It felt as if a prehistoric beast approached, not a player, and they desperately wanted to turn and flee. One man had inspired thousands of Matchless family's members to run like frightened rats. If someone had told them of such a thing happening in the past, they would have laughed it off. Now, however, they could not find it in themselves to laugh. They had clashed with the other guild many times, and both were roughly on the same level. Since Shifeng could suppress Matchless family by himself, naturally, he wouldn't have any issues doing so to Centurion Dynasty. Sky Slicer wore an ugly expression. Had he known something like this would happen, he would not have poked his nose into the situation. Brother Expert, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I only came here to recruit you because I have a grudge against Matchless family. If I had known that Brother Expert was so powerful, I would not have meddled in your affairs. For this offense, I am willing to pay 10,000 magic crystals as compensation, Sky Slicer respectfully told Shifeng. His previous pride had faded like smoke. What a generous offer! Solitary 9 quietly exclaimed. In his opinion, Sky Slicer was insane to offer 10,000 magic crystals as an apology. Even a well-known adventurer team like Aurora Sword had only accumulated 2,000 magic crystals thus far. Meanwhile, magic crystals were an indispensable resource in Cold Wind City. For example, lifestyle players needed the crystals when producing weapons and equipment. To increase their production success rate, they would spend magic crystals on renting special workshops in their respective lifestyle associations. There was also the Divine Colosseum, and training there cost a lot of crystals. Magic crystals were nearly impossible to save. Although there were quite a few ways to obtain magic crystals in Cold Wind City, handing over 10,000 magic crystals would deal a considerably painful blow to Centurion Dynasty. However, Solitary 9 wasn't a guild leader, so he couldn't understand Sky Slicer's thought process. If an expert of Shifeng's caliber decided to target Centurion Dynasty and randomly ambush its main force or elite members, the guild would break under the loss. Moreover, Centurion Dynasty couldn't do anything to Shifeng. If such a situation lasted for a long time, it could cripple the guild. The 10,000 magic crystal offer also served to put some distance between Centurion Dynasty and Shifeng. 10,000 magic crystals. Shifeng was slightly confused. The resources in Cold Wind City were far more abundant than he had assumed. Both Centurion Dynasty and Matchless family would only be third-rate guilds on God's Domain's continent. Giving away 10,000 magic crystals would likely bankrupt the guild. However, based on Sky Slicer's expression, he only felt a slight pang at the loss. When the guild leader saw the small frown forming on Shifeng's face, he realized that the other party wasn't particularly satisfied with the compensation. Gritting his teeth, he said, "If Brother Expert doesn't find the compensation satisfying, I can include this map as well." Saying so, Sky Slicer took out an ancient, tattered animal skin. Although the hide was quite old, it emitted a faint pressure. Although there was only a trace of this pressure, everyone seemed to fear it. "This is divine might?" Shifeng stared at the animal hide in Sky Slicer's hands in surprise. Divine might was an aura unique to gods. Any item that radiated the energy wouldn't be ordinary. Furthermore, this item had manifested in the ice crystal world. Although this other world's rank was quite high, it could only accommodate up to Tier 5 creatures. Tier 6 gods were barred from this world. The fact that such an item, once used by God, had manifested here made it even more valuable. "Brother Expert, what do you think?" Sky Slicer asked, smiling when he saw Shifeng's interest in the animal hide. He had obtained this animal hide some time ago, but although he recognized it as valuable, he had no way to reveal its secrets. Using it to appease Shifeng and improve his relationship with the man wasn't a bad trade. Deal. Shifeng nodded. His goal in traveling to the ice crystal world was to obtain eternal ice crystals, not to dominate Cold Wind City. He had no reason to clash with the local guilds. If not for Matchless family's determination to pick a fight, he wouldn't have bothered with them. Hearing Shifeng's reply, Sky Slicer breathed a sigh of relief. He then handed over the 10,000 magic crystals and the animal hide. As for the weapons and equipment littering the street, Shifeng decided to sell the items to Sky Slicer for coins and various rare materials. Weapons and equipment took up an entire slot by themselves in a player's bag space. However, materials didn't. One slot could hold multiple articles of the same item. By selling the weapons and equipment for materials, Shifeng could maximize the number of items he brought back to God's domain. Naturally, Sky Slicer was more than happy to accept Shifeng's offer. The matchless family members that had cornered Shifeng earlier consisted of the guild's elites and experts. Most of the players that had fallen to Shifeng had been experts. Hence, the weapons and equipment they had dropped were considered top tier in Cold Wind City. Through this transaction, Shifeng had obtained close to 8,000 gold in rare materials. If he resold these materials in his home world, he could easily earn over 20,000 gold. However, Shifeng wouldn't sell all of the materials even for a single payment of 20,000 gold. These rare materials could help the candlelight trading firm's forgers improve quickly. The trading firm might even manage to nurture a master forger. After obtaining the materials, Shifeng quickly made his way to Cold Wind City's library. Meanwhile, news of Shifeng's triumph over the matchless family quickly spread throughout Cold Wind City, shocking the resident players. That guy is so awesome. Not only did he suppress matchless family by himself, but even Centurion Dynasty treated him with respect. I wish I had half his strength. After this, Lifeless Thorn will have to relinquish his position as Cold Wind City's #1 expert. I wonder if this expert is accepting disciples. If he is or plans to start an adventurer team or guild, I'll be the first to apply. For a time, Cold Wind City's players heatedly discussed this newcomer. Meanwhile, a man wearing ice blue armor and wielding a purple spear faced off against a level 54, Great Lord-ranked demonic frost wolf in the Snow Rift, Cold Wind City's forbidden land. Despite the frost wolf's upper hand in speed and strength, it was helpless against this indifferent man. On the contrary, the player repeatedly restricted its movements. Because of this one man, the 20-man team following him easily dealt with the demonic frost wolf. Less than a minute after the fight had begun, the demonic frost wolf collapsed and dropped several items. The team members watched as their experience bars rose quite a bit. While the team rested, a heroic-looking female swordsman turned to the indifferent man, who rested with his eyes closed. Giggling, she said, "Lifeless, didn't you say that you're the strongest player in Cold Wind City? It seems that you have a rival now." A rival? Lifeless Thorn's eyes opened when he heard these words. Shaking his head, he said, "Cold Wind City's experts are clueless. They're nowhere near being a suitable rival for me." "I'm not talking about them," the female swordsman, Cleansing Whistle, responded. Revealing a leisurely smile, she said, "Weren't you boasting about how powerful you are? Do you think you can stand against 10,000 elites from Matchless Family? You've got to be kidding. You're talking about 10,000 elite players." Lifeless Thorn rolled his eyes. "Then why do you claim to be invincible in Cold Wind City? Here, take a look at this." Not long ago, a swordsman expert single-handedly suppressed Matchless Family's army. Centurion Dynasty even offered him a gift as an apology, Cleansing Whistle said, giggling as she sent a copy of Shifeng's battle video to Lifeless Thorn. Although Lifeless Thorn wanted to refute Cleansing Whistle's words, he couldn't help his shock as he watched the battle video. How can there be such a powerful expert in the city? Well? Hadn't you said something earlier about the swordsman class being crap? Now you know how powerful swordsmen are. Cleansing Whistle said, feeling a little proud when she saw the man's shock. He is powerful. He is on an entirely different level than I am, Lifeless Thorn straightforwardly admitted. The assassin's admission stunned Cleansing Whistle. She had thought the news would shake Lifeless Thorn's confidence, allowing her to get some payback for his insults towards her class. Before Cleansing Whistle could say more, Lifeless Thorn stood and took a return scroll from his bag. "What are you doing?" Cleansing Whistle asked curiously. "Do you really have to ask?" "I'm going to look for that expert," Lifeless Thorn said, excitement flashing in his eyes. "Are you mad? We wasted all that time to get here, yet you're going back, just like that?" Cleansing Whistle was astonished. However, ignoring her words, Lifeless Thorn activated the return scroll. He then transformed into a streak of light as he left the Snow Rift. Seeing this, Cleansing Whistle and the other team members had no choice but to take out return scrolls and head back as well. Meanwhile, in Cold Wind City's Nobles District, Shifeng impatiently took out the animal hide Sky Slicer had given him and carefully inspected as he traveled in an advanced carriage. Chapter 1454, Treasure that Surpasses Epic Rank. Chapter 1454, Treasure that Surpasses Epic Rank. It's no wonder why Sky Slicer couldn't do anything with this. When Shifeng tried to inspect the hide, he was only able to learn its name, Tattered Animal Hide. The item displayed no further information. Although this animal hide radiated a faint trace of divine might, due to time, it was damaged beyond recognition. The images and words that had been inscribed on the item were nearly impossible to discern. Fortunately, Shifeng was confident that he was even more skilled at analyzing items than a master appraiser. I wonder what this item is, exactly. Shifeng then activated Omniscient Eyes and inspected the hide once more. The moment he tried to do so, a loading bar appeared above the item. Watching the loading bar, Shifeng was astonished. How is this possible? Just what kind of item is this? When he used Omniscient Eyes to appraise dark gold items, the process took no more than 10 seconds, yet this scrap of hide required 30 seconds. Not even epic items took so long to appraise. As the seconds ticked by, the process restored the images and words on the animal hide. By the time the loading bar was full and disappeared, the originally tattered hide seemed as if it had regained its vitality as it began to restore itself. In the blink of an eye, the tattered animal hide looked brand new. This is an ancient shrine? Shifeng gave the leather an incredulous look. Big brother Yifeng, has something happened? Yenya asked from beside Shifeng. Everyone in the carriage was curious, looking to Shifeng for an explanation. This man had remained calm even when he stood against an army of 10,000 players, yet he stared at the hide Sky Slicer had given him in surprise. It's nothing. I'm just satisfied with the transaction with Sky Slicer, Shifeng said, chuckling. Although Shifeng had brushed the matter off verbally, inside, he was ecstatic. Ancient shrines were considerably old and mysterious locations. No one knew who had built them, yet every large-scale otherworld had them. Ancient shrines were extremely dangerous, guarded by powerful monsters. They were also crowded with traps. Even so, players residing in large-scale otherworlds swarmed to these ancient shrines like madmen. This was because ancient shrines housed the passage to travel from their otherworlds to God's domain's continent. As otherworlds experts grew more powerful, they would find clues leading to these ancient shrines. They would then search for the shrine's locations before exploring their interiors. Eventually, they would find God's domain. However, this process normally only started after players reached level 100. The maps that contained these ancient shrines were generally high-level areas. Moreover, the ancient shrines themselves were very well hidden. The animal hide Sky Slicer had given him was a record of all of the locations of and information about the Ice Crystal World's ancient shrines. This item would save players a lot of time. Only now did Shifeng understand why it had taken an unusual amount of time to appraise the animal hide. There was no doubt that the ancient shrine map in his hand was worth far more than a measly epic item. After all, whoever possessed this map would have full access to the Ice Crystal World. As long as he developed the path to one of the ancient shrines, he could freely transfer resources between the Ice Crystal World and his home world. The benefits of reselling these items could even tempt super guilds. The sooner he opened this path, the more benefits he'd obtain. According to the ancient shrine map, the easiest ancient shrine to reach was in a level 50 to 70 map. This map was a forbidden land that connected the various NPC cities in the Ice Crystal World. For Cold Wind City, this map was the Snow Rift. Only, the map indicated that the Snow Rift's ancient shrine lay under its core region, so it would be extremely difficult to locate. By the time anyone discovered the hidden map, Ice Crystal World's mainstream players would have exceeded the recommended level. With this map, my trip here has certainly been worth it. Shifeng began to formulate numerous plans as he inspected the ancient shrine's location. He had come to the Ice Crystal world because of a quest. Originally, he would have had to wait until someone from the Ice Crystal world activated an ancient shrine's teleportation gate to return to this world after finishing his quest. Moreover, that was dependent on whether or not the player who discovered the shrine would publish the teleportation gate's location. After all, he wouldn't be able to return to the Ice Crystal world unless he found another teleportation gate on God's domain's continent. However, things had changed. If he could activate an ancient shrine before he left, he would travel between worlds unhindered. This would give Zero Wing an advantage. Moreover, unlike the Dark Den, where he could only take one person with him, the ancient shrine's teleportation gates wouldn't have such a restriction. Of course, he'd have to pay the teleportation fee. Incredibly powerful NPCs guarded ancient shrines' teleportation gates, and each of these NPCs determined the fees based on how much distance separated the two worlds. Generally, the fee ranged between 20 and 50 magic crystals per person. Although Shifeng had once encountered a gate that charged 1 mana stone per person. Usually, only independent elite and expert players could afford to travel back and forth between worlds. However, the cost was nothing compared to the potential profits guilds could gain. After all, every other world had its own specialty resources that were extremely rare in God's domain. If guilds had to pay a small teleportation fee to obtain these precious resources, they would be more than happy to part with the cost. Right now, opening a path to the ancient shrine was far more important than obtaining eternal ice crystals to Shifeng. As long as he activated the ancient shrine, he'd accept failing the quest and losing his chance to trade eternal ice crystals for the Bracelet of Time. He could simply rely on the Ice Crystal world's resources to earn 5 million magic crystals within a month and purchase the Bracelet of Time for the originally stated price. It seems I'll need to make a trip to this ancient shrine later. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng carefully inspected the information on the animal hide. No one should ever underestimate an ancient shrine. Based on his memories, an ancient shrine required a considerable amount of time to raid and conquer. And he was alone in the Ice Crystal world. It wouldn't be easy to clear a path. As for the eternal ice crystals, Shifeng intended to visit the library before making his decision. If he could find a way to obtain the 10 eternal ice crystals, he would save a massive amount of magic crystals. After looking at the ancient shrine map for some time, Shifeng felt his head ache. The ancient shrine in question would be extraordinarily difficult to raid. Only now did he understand why the various otherworld's large guilds required a month to clear out a single shrine. Even a low-level ancient shrine, like the one located below the Snow Rift, was guarded by a level 70 mythic monster. Even the Snow Rift's final boss was a level 70, Grand Lord ranked 9-headed Earth Dragon. Although only one tier separated the two, the difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Alone, he could never defeat a level 70, mythic-ranked boss. When Shifeng finished examining the ancient shrine map, he turned to Solitary 9 and asked, "Brother 9, would you to help me with something?" "Help you?" Solitary 9 asked, confused. "Yes. I wish to establish an adventurer team in Cold Wind City," Shifeng stated. Chapter 1455, Adventurer Team Established. Chapter 1455, Adventurer Team Established. Establish an adventurer team? Big Brother Yifeng, are you joking? For a moment, everyone in the advanced carriage looked at Shifeng in surprise, wondering if they had misheard. Shifeng had previously expressed his lack of interest in establishing his own force. He had only come to Cold Wind City from another region to complete a quest. Yet, this man had just stated that he wanted to establish his own adventurer team. They were both confused and excited to hear this. If Shifeng formed an adventurer team, it would undoubtedly flourish. In addition, during the previous battle, Shifeng had made a name for himself in Cold Wind City. He wouldn't have any issues establishing a guilds, much less an adventurer team. They could already see players lining up to apply. "What do you need our help with?" Solitary 9 asked, practically glowing. He had already decided to join any force this man established. After all, Shifeng's strength and combat standards were far more impressive than his own. Watching Shifeng's battle had opened the doors to a completely new world for him. Unfortunately, Shifeng hadn't shown any interest in setting up his own force, so he hadn't asked the swordsman about it. He had only hoped to form a close relationship with the swordsman and find an opportunity to seek Shifeng's guidance. Now, however, he didn't need to do so. He could simply join Shifeng's adventurer team. His goal in establishing an adventurer team was to improve his combat standards by delving into God's domain's various ruins and dungeons. He did not like participating in the struggles between guilds. Most importantly, he had always hated the way Matchless family and Centurion dynasty had operated. Hence, he had established the Aurora Sword Adventurer team. He had thought that he and his companions could join Waveheart, Cold Wind City's #1 adventurer team, if the guilds put too much pressure on Aurora Sword. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about that anymore. I'd like to ask your help in advertising and organizing the adventurer team's recruitment. After giving the matter some more thought, he continued, I don't need a lot of people for the team. 3,000 or 4,000 members will be enough. Official members will have to reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor at the very least, though the requirement will increase as time goes on. Cold Wind City had its own Divine Coliseum, and although it wasn't connected to those in other cities, it wouldn't affect players' evaluations. The 5th floor. Yenya's jaw dropped. Big Brother Yifeng, very few people in Cold Wind City will be able to meet that requirement. Most experts can only reach the 4th floor. Yenya was one of Aurora Sword's top-ranked experts, but even she had only recently made it to the 5th floor. Quality is more important than quantity. Of course, we could let players take another set of tests before joining the adventurer team, Shifeng said. He then took out the list of Zero Wing's test criteria when recruiting members, displaying it for Solitary 9 and his party. Not all talents in God's domain were powerhouses. Rather than only recruiting those who were already strong, they could also look for players with potential. Players with potential would become reserve members for the moment. Reserve members would then be tested and judged based on their improvement speed. They could become official members once they reached a certain standard. If not, they would have to resort to the primary test, reaching the Trial Tower's 5th floor. Although this two-stage process was tedious, it helped Zero Wing avoid missing out on potential experts. Of course, there was a minimum requirement to become a reserve member. Players had to reach the Trial Tower's 4th floor. At this stage of the game, the Trial Tower's 4th floor was still a fairly difficult hurdle for players. However, as player standards continued to improve, more of them would reach the 4th floor. If a player could not even reach the 4th floor, there was no point for them to take the test to become a reserve member. Even so, Shifeng's requirements stunned Solitary 9 and his companions. In Cold Wind City, players who could reach the Trial Tower's 4th floor were generally recruited to become elite members in one of the two major guilds, yet they would only be reserve members in Shifeng's adventurer team. Once the city's players found out about this, they'd call him a madman. After all, how could an adventurer team offer more benefits than a guild? Convincing 1,000 people to join this man's adventurer team would be immensely difficult, much less 5,000 people. Brother Yifeng, what do you intend to call your adventurer team? Solitary 9 asked. The adventurer team's name? Shifeng thought about how others had called him an Azura. Being intensely uncreative, he replied, let's call it the Azura Adventurer Team. At first, he had considered simply calling it the Zero Wing Adventurer Team. After all, he had planned to use this adventurer team as reinforcements for Zero Wing's core members. However, after giving the matter some thought, he gave up on the idea. After all, many of God's domain's experts disliked the restrictions guilds imposed on their members. Instead, he could invite the experts that refused to join Zero Wing to his Azura Adventurer team. This way, the Azura Adventurer team could collect independent experts who disliked guilds, forming a symbiotic relationship with Zero Wing. Then, Brother Yifeng, can my Aurora Sword Adventurer team join yours? Solitary 9 asked anxiously after taking a deep breath. Of course. It'll help me out quite a bit if you join. As long as your team members can meet one of the two requirements, they are welcome, Shifeng said, smiling. He already had a rough estimation of Solitary 9's strength. He had also listened to Yenya's comments on the matter. Not only was Solitary 9 one of Cold Wind City's top 3 MTs, but he had also reached the last stage of the Trial Tower's 6th floor. He was only a step away from the 7th. Although he didn't know any advanced combat techniques, he was not that far from the half-step refinement realm. In Zero Wing, he could easily rank among the guild's top 10 MTs. It was quite impressive. Furthermore, Solitary 9 hadn't received any official training like Zero Wing's core members had. The man had reached that standard of his own power. If Solitary 9 were offered sufficient training and guidance, he could easily reach the half-step refinement realm. Given enough time, reaching the refinement realm wouldn't be much of an issue. As such a capable expert, why wouldn't he welcome Solitary 9 into his adventurer team? Unfortunately, he'd have no choice but to let go the Aurora Sword members who couldn't meet the recruitment requirements. It was important that an organization adhere to its own rules. Otherwise, the organization would lose its members' trust. I understand. Solitary 9 replied. The Azura adventurer team wanted experts. He'd have no choice but to compensate the Aurora Sword members who didn't make the cut. Following which, Shifeng and his new companions drew up a list of benefits that the Azura adventurer team would offer its members. With such a high recruitment requirement, not many players would apply if they didn't offer appropriate benefits. Before they realized it, their advanced carriage had arrived before Cold Wind City's library. What a marvelous library! As soon as Shifeng alighted from the carriage, he could not help but stare at the mountainous building before him. Compared to White River City's library, Cold Wind City's was a giant. The building was well over 300 meters tall. It was large enough to fill 3 sports arenas. At the same time, the library felt ancient like some long-lost ruin. Following which, Shifeng activated his Demon Hunter title and approached the entrance. The 4 NPC guards by the doors glanced at Shifeng as he passed by, showing no intention of stopping the swordsman. Elsewhere, Solitary 9 published the recruitment information for the Azura adventurer team on Cold Wind City's official forums. At the same time, Yenya and the others saw to the necessary arrangements to spread the news throughout the city. Very quickly, news about Shifeng's adventurer team reached every player in Cold Wind City. What? He's actually trying to establish an adventurer team? When Thundering Sky, who had recently resurrected, received the news, his expression darkened. Chapter 1456, Adventurer Team's Benefits. Chapter 1456, Adventurer Team's Benefits. Guild Leader, quite a few of our members have withdrawn from the guild as soon as they heard the news. If we don't do something to stop this, I'm afraid that we'll lose more of our members, Feather Wind cautiously reported to Thundering Sky. The battle at the auction house dealt a massive blow to Matchless Family's reputation, and because of that, the guild had lost over 1,000 elites and experts. Yet, despite such huge losses, Matchless Family couldn't do anything about them. After all, the guild was utterly helpless against Shifeng. To make matters worse, Shifeng had decided to establish his own adventurer team. They couldn't afford to provoke Shifeng when he stood alone, but they could still avoid the man. Matchless Family had over 100,000 members. Even if Shifeng were more powerful, he wouldn't be able to damage the guild's foundations if their members spread out. If he had an adventurer team under his control, however, Matchless Family would likely have to face thousands of players in the future. It had become even harder to deal with this expert. Damn it! Just who is he? Why haven't we heard of this guy before? Thundering Sky's expression twisted as he read the latest report. If not for Shifeng's sudden appearance, their plans wouldn't have been interrupted, and he would have secured his hold on Cold Wind City. Guild Leader, should we contact those people? Feather Wind asked softly. It can't be helped. At this rate, Cold Wind City will either end up in Centurion Dynasty's hands or the Azura Adventurer team's. Since they've taken Cold Wind City from me, I won't let them have it either, Thundering Sky growled, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Contact them. Tell them that Matchless Family is willing to join their guild. However, we require that they destroy Centurion Dynasty and the Azura Adventurer team. Although Cold Wind City's players couldn't travel to other NPC cities right now, they could communicate with players in these cities offline. An upper echelon from Hecate, a large guild in another NPC city, had contacted Matchless Family, stating Hecate's interest in purchasing the guild. Initially, Thundering Sky had hesitated. After all, Hecate was far more powerful than Matchless Family, controlling more than 5 NPC cities. Hecate even ruled over Ice Crystal City, the Ice Crystal World's largest NPC city. Thundering Sky wasn't confident of Matchless Family's survival should it insult this massive guild. He had hoped to solidify his control over Cold Wind City before anyone cleared the Snow Rift. Even if his city were connected with other NPC cities, he'd more or less have the power to withstand outside forces. Now that he had lost any hope of becoming his city's overlord, joining Hecate was his best choice. Once the passage opened, with Hecate's secret support, Matchless Family would send both Centurion Dynasty and Shurfeng to meet their maker. Understood. I'll see to it right away. Featherwind then logged out of the game and disappeared from the office. Elsewhere, after splitting up, Solitary 9 and the others took the 3,000 gold Shurfeng had given them to purchase a considerably large plot of land from the city hall. They then visited the Adventurers Association to begin their residence's construction. Although the residence was not as luxurious as a guild residence, it could easily accommodate 1,000 people at a time. Hopeful applicants had already surrounded Azura's residence. Over 4,000 players waited for their evaluation, and this was only the beginning. As expected of the adventurer team established by Cold Wind City's #1 expert, Azura's residence is even larger than Wave Heart's. That's right. I bet it won't be long before Azura becomes the #1 adventurer team in Cold Wind City. While the crowd waited for the application process to start, Solitary 9 emerged and posted the recruitment requirements at the entrance. As Azura's recruitment standards went public, many players were shocked. Is the Azura Adventurer team crazy? Only those who reached the Trial Tower's 5th floor qualify to join. Do they not know what it means to reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor? What? Even those who can reach the 4th floor have to deal with further testing. If I had that kind of strength, I would have joined a guild as a core member. Why would I even bother joining an adventurer team? Is this really an adventurer team? Why do I feel like its recruitment requirements are harsher than a large guild's? With these standards, I doubt that Azura will even recruit 1,000 members. No, it might not even get 500 members. Is the Azura Adventurer team toying with us? Crap. Isn't this just an adventurer team? Who would be desperate enough to deal with this crap? When the players outside Azura's residence saw the requirements, some laughed, some cursed, and others simply turned and left. Everyone thought that the Azura Adventurer team was mad. As far as they knew, Azura's recruitment requirements were even higher than a first-rate guild's, not to mention Cold Wind City's guilds. With such high requirements, only a small number of players throughout the Ice Crystal world would bother to join the adventurer team. After all, Azura was merely an adventurer team. It couldn't offer any significant benefits. An adventurer team just existed to give players an easier time forming teams and parties to raid dungeons and explore ruins. Expert players never needed to worry about finding party members. Furthermore, the Azura Adventurer team had only recently been established. Even with an expert like Shurfeng, without dungeon raid or ruin exploration results, expert players were less inclined to consider an adventurer team. Commander, players have stood outside our doors for quite some time now, yet only a few have applied. What should we do? Yenya stated at the crowd outside in frustration. Yenya, stop calling me commander. Now that we've joined the Azura Adventurer team, Yifeng is the commander. I am simply one of Azura's party leaders, Solitary 9 said. Regarding the recruitment issue, the commander has stated that if people don't apply, will reveal this benefit to the public. He had mentioned the possibility of this awkward situation to Shifeng, and after giving the matter some thought, the man had decided to raise the team members' benefits. Any official member of the Azura Adventurer team could use contribution points to purchase dark gold weapons and equipment as well as the opportunity to learn various combat techniques. What? Co-commander, is that true? Yenya exclaimed when she heard this. Being able to purchase dark gold weapons and equipment from the adventurer team was already impressive. Even Cold Wind City's experts only had a few dark gold items on them. Usually, only Guild's core members had any access to such items, yet the Azura's official members could bid on these items. However, the dark gold items paled in comparison to the combat techniques. Most players knew something about combat techniques, mysterious techniques that could significantly improve one's combat power. Unfortunately, very few players actually knew any of these techniques. In fact, neither of Cold Wind City's two large guilds had any players that had learned a combat technique. Yet, the Azura Adventurer team offered to teach its members various combat techniques. This felt like a dream. Micham. The commander made the decision, so don't worry about it. In any case, publish the information outside. Solitary 9 nodded. He, too, had been surprised when he had heard Shifeng's decision. Following which, Yenya ran to the notice board outside the residence's entrance and published this shocking announcement. Chapter 1457, Clue to Evolution. Chapter 1457, Clue to Evolution. Cold Wind City's Library. As soon as Shifeng entered the library, he felt as if he had just stepped into a different world. The library didn't contain any books whatsoever. Instead, the hall included a starry sky and organized shrubbery. Creeks and bridges snaked through the main hall. From time to time, one caught sight of glittering, translucent balls of water rising from the creeks before they dispersed into tiny drops. All of these creeks originated from a single location, the massive water ball hovering in the center of the hall. Not even Star Moon City's library was this beautiful. What an amazing library. It's fully automated with the use of magic water balls. The mana density is double that of outside. If players could practice their spells in here, their learning efficiency would double, maybe triple. Shifeng could not help his surprise when he sensed the building's mana. However, Shifeng was surprised to see only a few magical class players in the library. At a glance, he only counted 200 to 300 players. It was an abnormally small number for a library. What he didn't know was that one had to become a baron before they could enter Cold Wind City's library. If not for Shifeng's the Demon Hunter title, the level 180 NPC guards at the entrance would have chased him away. He didn't give the matter too much thought, though. He approached the central water ball and began to search for information on the eternal ice crystals. It was far more convenient to search through the magic water ball than it would be to leaf through numerous books. There sure is a lot of information here. Shifeng was astonished when his search for the eternal ice crystal came back with over 100 results. Normally, he'd be lucky if he got 10 or so results for a particular search. Fortunately, it was usually enough information to find the item they wanted, yet hundreds of entries mentioned the eternal ice crystals. This almost guaranteed that he could find the crystal's location. Following which, Shifeng browsed through the information. How is this possible? What Shifeng found shocked him. The eternal ice crystal was actually a mana crystal. Only, due to the ice crystal world's influence, the power of frost tainted these mana crystals, transforming them into eternal ice crystals. These crystals could be found in the ice crystal world's various forbidden lands, but only Great Lord ranked bosses and above had a chance of dropping them. Unfortunately, these bosses wouldn't drop complete eternal ice crystals. Rather, they had a very low chance of dropping ice crystal fragments. One had a 50% chance of successfully synthesizing 10 ice crystal fragments into one completely eternal ice crystal. No wonder she gave me a month for this quest. It's certainly not going to be easy. Shifeng frowned. Although the Snow Rift was a forbidden land, it didn't have many field bosses. Considering the low drop rate and the 50% success rate, it would take a long time to obtain one eternal ice crystal, much less 10. I guess I need to hurry. Now that he knew that eternal ice crystals were actually mana crystals, he had even more reason to obtain them. He also needed mana crystals to evolve the Abyssal Blade. Although the Tier 1 Abyssal Blade was plenty powerful, particularly when it came to compatibility rate, its basic attributes weren't quite on the level of top-tier epic weapons. He wanted to evolve the Abyssal Blade, but he hadn't found any mana crystals, so he had been forced to set the matter aside for some time. If he could evolve the Abyssal Blade once more, he'd be more confident of defeating the Ancient Shrine's Guardian boss. Armed with this new information, Shifeng was glad he had decided to establish an adventurer team in Cold Wind City. He wouldn't have had any hope of collecting enough eternal ice crystals in time if he were alone. Following which, Shifeng left the library and hurried towards Azura's residence. Shortly after the Azura adventurer team had published the new benefits, the crowd outside the team's residence went into an uproar. What? Members can trade contribution points for combat techniques? Azura is actually willing to teach combat techniques. Not even the city's two large guilds offer that benefit. Although Cold Wind City had many experts, only a handful had learned combat techniques. These experts treated these techniques like family heirlooms, refusing to teach any outsider. But the general public knew how powerful combat techniques were. A player with a combat technique could easily defeat one without. Moreover, unlike skills and spells, players could improve their combat standards while they learned a technique. This was yet another reason that experts refused to teach others their techniques. They adamantly refused all sorts of payment for the training. Yet, the Azura adventurer team wanted to teach its members various combat techniques. The news stunned countless players. None of them doubted the validity of Azura's offer. As Cold Wind City's #1 expert, Shifeng certainly knew many combat techniques. There wasn't anything surprising about him teaching his members one or two of these techniques. Moreover, the more powerful an expert was, the more they would value their promises. After a short moment, players crowded the previously empty registration area. The crowd even included players who had yet to reach the trial tower's 4th floor. These players begged Solitary 9 to give them a chance and let them become reserve members. For a time, Solitary 9 and the other players manning the registration area were incredibly busy. More players had come to apply than they had expected. Even 5th floor experts were rushing to put in their applications. Among these experts, many had been main force members from well-known adventurer teams or experts from the two large guilds. In less than 30 minutes, Azura had over 100 official members and 500 reserve members. Unfortunately, Solitary 9 rejected every player who hadn't yet reached the trial tower's 4th floor, telling these players to return after they did so. News of the Azura adventurer team's offer to teach its members combat techniques quickly spread throughout the city. It became a hot topic among these players, and many expressed their intention to join the organization. The city's two large guilds suffered headaches because of this. They had planned to ridicule Azura for its high recruitment requirements, but now, they were only frustrated over the new adventurer team. If Azura gathered enough experts and taught them combat techniques, there was no doubt that the adventurer team would become Cold Wind City's overlord. Guild leader, I've notified Hecate. However, more than 500 players have already joined Azura. At this rate, Azura will rule the city long before Hecate opens a path to Cold Wind City, Featherwind said, shocked as he overlooked the statistics he had recently received. This won't do. Go Anne. No. We'll go and find Waveheart. Even if we have to pay a high price, we have to form an alliance with the adventurer team and convince them to deal with Azura, Thundering Sky said as he stood. He had hoped to avoid allying with Waveheart to deal with Azura, but it'd be enough if the adventurer team helped Matchless Family survive until Hecate arrived. Guild leader, a report just came in. Waveheart's Lifeless Thorn has led a team to Azura's residence. By the looks of it, Lifeless Thorn plans to take action, Featherwind said, smiling coldly at the latest report. Lifeless Thorn was a battle maniac. Since his debut in Cold Wind City, not a single expert he had challenged had lasted more than 5 moves. Eventually, he had become Cold Wind City's publicly acknowledged, #1 expert. Not even the city's main guilds could do anything against the man and were forced to ignore his existence. He's making a move. Thundering Sky could not help but laugh. This is going to be interesting. Let's go. We're heading to the residence to watch this play out. Chapter 1458, Demigod-ranked expert. Chapter 1458, Demigod-ranked expert. Cold Wind City, Azura Adventurer Team's residence. As soon as Shurfeng stepped out of the advanced carriage, he was greeted by a sea of people crowding around the residence's entrance. It was even more lively than an imperial capital's auction house. Why are so many people here? Shurfeng was confused to see such a large crowd. Around a dozen people stood before the registration area, the leader of which was a man in icy blue armor, holding a purple spear in his right hand. Although this man stood in silence, the surrounding players had distanced themselves from him, creating a wide, open space clearing. Aside from this man's companions, no player dared to move within 20 yards of him. I hadn't expected Lifeless Thorn to visit. Why do you think he's here? Do you really need to ask? He's here to issue a challenge. Lifeless Thorn was Cold Wind City's #1 expert. Now that someone has usurped his position, he must be here to reclaim his status. Indeed. I've heard Waveheart members talk about how bored he is because he hasn't been able to find someone who can put up a decent fight. He's been spending time in the Forbidden Land to open a path to other NPC cities so he can find new experts to challenge. This is going to be interesting. I wonder which of the 2 experts will win the duel. You can't figure that out on your own. Lifeless Thorn is definitely going to win. He's invincible in Cold Wind City. On the other hand, the mysterious swordsman has only made a name for himself recently. I wonder if that swordsman will accept Lifeless Thorn's challenge. The spectating crowd discussed the potential duel between Shurfeng and Lifeless Thorn. They all anticipated the fight between these 2 powerful experts. Guild leader, Lifeless Thorn has grown stronger again. He's replaced his old weapon, too. His last weapon was a top-tier, level 45, dark gold spear called Meteor Spear. It had been crimson red, and I've heard that Lifeless Thorn had found it in a dark gold treasure chest. It seems that he had earned quite the harvest from the Snow Rift, Featherwind said, smiling as he gazed at the purple spear in the berserker's hand. That damnable swordsman is in trouble. Indeed. If Lifeless Thorn gets serious, not even Sky Slicer and I would have any hope against him. That's why Hecate's been urging us to do everything we can to recruit him. It's a pity that he isn't interested in joining a guild. I doubt he even would have joined Waveheart if not for the help in obtaining better weapons and equipment, Thundering Sky said as he tried to sort out a tangle of complex emotions. He had always treated Lifeless Thorn like the biggest thorn in his side, but even Hecate had warned him not to provoke the man. Now, Lifeless Thorn would finally be of some use to him. Lifeless, I already told you that our commander isn't here. Standing here is pointless. If you want to challenge the commander, I'll let him know once he's finished his tasks and returns. Solitary 9 growled, frustrated with Lifeless Thorn obstructing the registration area. Solitary 9 had personally experienced this man's power. The gap between them was massive. Despite being one of the top 3 MTs in Cold Wind City, he had only lasted 3 moves against Lifeless Thorn. From start to end, he had been powerless to retaliate. Moreover, their duel had been over a month ago. Now, Lifeless Thorn radiated an even more frightening feeling. With a single glance from the man, Solitary 9 felt as if he trudged through a muddy swamp, his movement growing sluggish. On the surface, the 2 large guilds ruled over Cold Wind City. In reality, however, these guilds only operated as they wished because of Lifeless Thorn's disinterest in struggles over power and resources. Since the Berserker blocked off the registration area, who would be bold enough to come forth to apply to Azura? That won't be a problem. I have plenty of spare time. If I can't face him today, then you can contact your commander and inform him of my challenge, Lifeless Thorn said, smiling. He can choose the time and place. It doesn't matter to me. 9. You know that Lifeless is a battle maniac. Once he has made a decision, nothing can stop him. Just contact your commander, Cleansing Whistle advised. In reality, she, too, was curious to see who would win a fight between Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn. Lifeless Thorn might have claimed that he wasn't a match for the newcomer, but he was simply being humble. She was fully aware of the man's true power. Not only had he obtained the top-tier, epic weapon, Thunder Spear, but he had also obtained the Lightning Saint's legacy, a peak legacy. Even throughout the Ice Crystal world, Lifeless Thorn could rank near the top. How could he possibly lose to some unknown swordsman? You guys. As Solitary 9 struggled with his frustration, a deep voice reached him from down the hall. Alright, I accept your challenge. Everyone immediately turned towards the voice. Commander. Solitary 9 gave Shifeng a confused look as he approached. Shifeng had told him that he needed to concentrate on finding certain information, and they shouldn't disturb him unless it were of the utmost importance. Hence, he had avoided contacting the commander. Ha ha ha. You've finally shown yourself. Lifeless Thorn smiled at Shifeng, who hid his name and appearance. His eyes shining with fighting spirit, he said, I knew an expert like you wouldn't refuse a challenge. The crowd had gasped when they heard Shifeng's answer. They hadn't expected the Azura Adventurer team to accept the challenge. I'll agree to your challenge, but a simple duel would be too boring. Why don't we make a bet? Shifeng asked, smiling. Even during his previous life, he had heard of this man. One of the 12 sacred berserkers, Lightning Warrior. Lifeless Thorn had only been a step away from becoming a Tier 6 berserker god. This player had become so famous in the past because he had provoked the Super Guild, King's Return. Although the guild eventually killed him, his defeat had been glorious. During the final battle, King's Return had dispatched 3 Tier 5 players to suppress Lifeless Thorn, yet he had killed one of these Tier 5 players before he had fallen. In the end, a Tier 6, God-ranked expert had joined the fray, and Lifeless Thorn had faltered and died. Lifeless Thorn's rise to prominence had been extremely fast. Although he had been incredibly famous in his own otherworld, he had only become truly renowned after venturing to God's Domain's continent. Once there, he had caused quite the commotion as he had challenged and defeated one expert from the God's Domain experts list after another. It hadn't taken him long to rank among the top 50 on the list. If not for the fact that he had remained a solo player, refusing to join any organization, he wouldn't have been stuck at Tier 5. If he hadn't been so stubborn and simply joined some random, first-rate guild, he would have likely become a Tier 6 God-ranked expert. Shifeng had never thought that he'd encounter Lifeless Thorn in the Ice Crystal world. He was truly blessed. In the past, Lifeless Thorn had never joined a guild, but now that Shifeng had established his own adventurer team, he could attempt to recruit the berserker. It'd be almost as good as convincing the man to join Zero Wing. If Shifeng succeeded, he'd have yet another powerful supporter. Chapter 1459, Battle for Number 1. Chapter 1459, Battle for Number 1. A bet? Smiling, Lifeless Thorn responded without hesitation, that won't be a problem. Even if you hadn't offered, I would have. I just wonder if you're brave enough to accept my wager. When they heard Lifeless Thorn's reply, Waveheart's members sent Shifeng provocative glances. At the same time, their gazes contained a hint of pity. They acted as if they already knew this bet's outcome. Solitary 9 finally realized what was happening. Quickly, he whispered to Shifeng, Commander, you must not agree to his bet. He wants your combat techniques. Not long ago, he had challenged every expert in Cold Wind City who had their own combat technique and forced the defeated to teach him. That's why he's become so powerful. Combat techniques? Realization dawned on Shifeng. He had been confused by how fast Lifeless Thorn had accepted his offer. Now, he knew why the man was so eager. He had proposed the bet to create an opportunity where he could recruit Lifeless Thorn into the Azura Adventurer team. He hadn't expected this berserker to have designs on him as well. Combat techniques were precious in God's domain. The various large guilds that had their own only taught their most important members. Everyone else would have to rely on others' battle videos, either mimicking those with combat techniques or creating their own. Shifeng now understood why Lifeless Thorn had risen so quickly on God's domain's continent. You're the one who suggested a bet. Are you chickening out? Lifeless Thorn ridiculed as he glanced at Shifeng. I have no issues. I'll accept your wager as long as it is within my capabilities to fulfill. Every core member in Zero Wing could learn the guild's combat techniques. Even if Lifeless Thorn didn't want to gamble combat techniques, if he joined Azura, he could easily purchase them with enough contribution points. Good. Hearing Shifeng's reply, Lifeless Thorn hurriedly said, my request is simple. If I win, you teach me that special footwork technique you used earlier. If you win, you can ask for whatever you want. Ordinary players would have watched Shifeng's battle against Matchless Family as entertainment, they wouldn't have examined the swordsman's skills. However, he had realized that Shifeng's disappearing act wasn't the result of a skill, but due to the man employing a special footwork technique to fool his opponent's eyes. He had never even heard of such powerful footwork before. Compared to this combat technique, those he had learned were garbage. Although Azura had declared that its members could purchase combat techniques with contribution points, he was fully aware that there were differences between techniques. This swordsman would never let his adventurer team's members trade CP for such an effective footwork technique. This guy really has a big appetite. He's actually aiming for Big Brother Yi Feng's unique combat technique right off the bat. He is shameless. Yenya stared at Lifeless Thorn with contempt. Solitary 9 and the others nodded in agreement. They had a rough understanding of combat techniques, as well. For example, offensive combat techniques were the most common, while defensive combat techniques were much rarer. Footwork and breathing techniques were the rarest, capable of enhancing a player's maneuverability. If a player learned one of those, their combat power could reach a whole new level. Yet, despite understanding the value of such a technique, Lifeless Thorn shamelessly asked for it. That's all? Shifeng asked. Yeah, that's all I want. Do you accept? Lifeless Thorn nodded, curious about Shifeng's calm reaction. I don't have any problems with that. My request is pretty simple as well. If I win, you have to join the Azura Adventurer team, Shifeng said, smiling. Deal. I'll join Azura if you can defeat me, Lifeless Thorn agreed without hesitation. However, he continued, to ensure that our duel is fair, we'll use balance mode. An uproar ripped through the crowd when they heard this. Lifeless Thorn, aren't you asking for too much? Not only have you asked for a powerful combat technique if you win, but you dare to ask for balanced mode? You're Cold Wind City's #1 expert. How is this fair? Solitary 9 cursed. In a balanced mode PvP, the opponent's basic attributes would equalize, and any level or tier suppression would be rendered useless. Normally, players only used this mode if they wanted to compare their techniques. Although I like PvP, I have no interest in one-sided oppression, Lifeless Thorn declared righteously. After watching Shifeng's battle video, he realized how high the swordsman's basic attributes were. He definitely wasn't a match for the swordsman. Although he was proud of his strength, he wasn't blindly confident. Alright. Let's use balanced mode. The suggestion didn't particularly surprise Shifeng. If Lifeless Thorn could not tell the difference between their basic attributes despite watching his battle video, he wouldn't want to recruit the man for the Azura Adventurer team. Good. Let's sign a contract, then. Hearing Shifeng's consent, Lifeless Thorn pulled out a contract he had prepared earlier. All it was missing was Shifeng's signature. After reading through the contract, Shifeng signed it. With the main god system as the judge, no one could deny the duel's outcome. Following which, Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn headed to one of the Divine Colosseum's combat rooms. The combat room, which could accommodate up to 10,000 spectators, was full. The large screen in the main hall would live-stream the duel. Almost every player in Cold Wind City with nothing better to do made their way to the Divine Colosseum to watch the match. This duel would determine Cold Wind City's true #1 expert. No one wanted to miss this. Azura's commander is pretty arrogant. He dares to face Lifeless Thorn in balanced mode. He'll humiliate himself, Cleansing Whistle stated, smiling faintly at Shifeng, who stood in the arena. That's right. Brother Lifeless' split spear is no laughing matter. Even Shadowless, the city's second-ranked expert, couldn't evade it after activating a berserk skill. Now that Brother Lifeless has the Thunder Spear, his split spear is even stronger. He can probably instant-kill Shadowless now, a level 45 shield warrior said, nodding. While Wave Hearts members merrily chatted, the timer above the stage began to count down. As if he had become someone completely different, Lifeless Thorn began to release a bone-chilling killing intent. The look in his eyes had changed as well. He felt like a ferocious beast. Tension gripped the stage as the seconds ticked by, and the players in the stands felt stifled. The moment the timer reached 0, Lifeless Thorn activated twofold Berserk, his aura becoming explosively intense. The Berserker knew he couldn't afford to be careless against Shifeng. If this fight had happened before he had obtained the Lightning Saint's legacy, he would have hesitated to challenge Shifeng. The swordsman's combat techniques were clearly superior to his. He would have been asking for a beating if he had challenged the man to a balanced mode duel. However, Peak Legacies granted Legacy Berserk skills, which could be used in conjunction with ordinary Berserk skills. If he activated twofold Berserk, his basic attributes would exceed Shifeng's by leaps and bounds. Even if Shifeng's combat standards were superior, the swordsman could never make up for the gap in attributes. I have a hidden class. Don't blame me for hiding it. You only have yourself to blame for being careless. I'll gladly take that footwork technique now. Lifeless Thorn smiled at Shifeng before activating charge and advancing. Chapter 1460, Complete Suppression. Chapter 1460, Complete Suppression. After activating charge, it took only an instant for Lifeless Thorn to cross the 20+ yards separating him and Shifeng. As soon as Lifeless Thorn reached his opponent, he thrust Thunder's Spear at the other player, sending over 20 afterimages at Shifeng from different angles. It was impossible to find the real weapon among the fakes. How has his split spear become so much stronger? Solitary 9 could not help but gasp. When he had dueled Lifeless Thorn, the Berserker had only produced over a dozen spear images. Even with his shield, he hadn't been able to block every spear image, forced to rely on luck and hope he blocked the real weapon. Yet, the Berserker could now produce over 20 images, nearly double what he had previously been capable of. Just watching the images was confusing, not to mention trying to block the attack. Brother Lifeless' twofold Berserk is impressive. Not even an MT can block so many images. The attack surprised Wave Hearts members. Lifeless is taking this too seriously. Cleansing Whistle revealed a helpless smile as she watched the Berserker fight with everything he had. His opponent is doomed. Throughout her time raiding dungeons and adventuring with Lifeless Thorn, this was the first time she had seen him go all out. Moreover, in a balanced mode duel, the player with higher basic attributes would be suppressed to match the opponent's. Since Lifeless Thorn's attributes weren't affected, he wouldn't feel awkward as he moved. In contrast, Shifeng would need some time to get used to the lower attributes. It was clear that Lifeless Thorn realized this, yet he refused to give Shifeng any time to adapt. With so many advantages, the Berserker would have an easy time winning this duel. As the numerous spear images were about to devour Shifeng, a blue light flashed before him. Following which, a loud explosion shook the arena, followed by a powerful shockwave radiating across the stage. Lifeless Thorn's thunder spear had stopped an inch from Shifeng's neck. Impossible. Cleansing Whistle shot up from her seat, shock flashing in her eyes. Lifeless split spear. Why did it stop? What? Brother Lifeless messed up. The other Wave Heart members were similarly stunned. Lifeless Heart had rarely ever failed to hit his target with split spear. His opponent could only block the attack if they were lucky. Of course, nobody was more surprised than Lifeless Thorn. However, the Berserker didn't give up after his first attack had failed. Immediately, he executed split spear again, sending another 20+ spear images thrusting at Shifeng. Before the spear images reached Shifeng, another blue light flashed. This time, the thunder spear stopped several centimeters away from Shifeng's right shoulder. There was more distance between the weapon and the swordsman than before. Did it hit? What's going on? Wave Heart's members watched Shifeng in confusion, realizing that golden scales covered the man's body. He actually deflected Lifeless split spear. Is he some kind of monster? Cleansing Whistle's expression darkened as she watched the fight. Split spear was so impressive because it was nearly impossible to pinpoint the real weapon, which confused the opponent as they tried to defend themselves. But in the brief moment before Lifeless Thorn's weapon reached Shifeng, the swordsman located the real thunder spear and properly deflected it. His grasp of strength and timing was simply godlike. Before Cleansing Whistle could overcome her shock, Shifeng took a step forward and disappeared. He vanished. Lifeless Thorn immediately responded by executing Whirlwind Slash, his spear sweeping horizontally to slice everything within 10 yards of the Berserker. Dang! A loud clang echoed throughout the venue. Following which, Shifeng reappeared as he flew over a dozen yards backward before landing. Despite being knocked back so far, Shifeng hadn't lost a single HP. He had nullified Lifeless Thorn's horizontal slash with parry. As expected of the Lightning Warrior. His reactions are so fast. Shifeng smiled faintly as he glanced at the still vibrating killing ray. Split sword was Lifeless Thorn's trademark combat technique. He had used it plenty of times against the experts on God's Domain experts list. However, the technique was still immature right now. Although he could create over 20 spear images, his attacks were monotone. Against Shifeng, who was capable of pushing his 5 senses to their very limits and had a perfect grasp over his environment, the immature technique was useless. Moreover, although balanced mode would equalize the combatant's basic attributes, it wouldn't affect the player's physiques. To Shifeng, whose physique exceeded that of an ordinary Tier 2 player, Lifeless Thorn's split spear was a joke. Meanwhile, the Berserker felt an unprecedented pressure weigh down on him as he watched his opponent. In a clash of techniques, the player that used a skill first would lose. Although this duel wasn't a pure exchange of techniques, it was the first time he had encountered a player who could treat his split spear like a normal attack. You are incredibly strong. Despite the minor loss, Lifeless Thorn wasn't discouraged. Instead, he smiled as he said, I admit that I am no match for you in terms of technique. However, combat techniques aren't the only factor that determine a player's strength. One must also take into account attributes and skills. Saying so, Lifeless Thorn's thunder spear shuddered slightly. Suddenly, 6 golden replicas of the weapon appeared around him. This move was Adjudication Spear, one of Thunder Spear's skills. Every Adjudication Spear carried 100% of Lifeless Thorn's strength. Moreover, he had complete control over the weapons and could use them alongside his split spear. The only downside was its 10-second duration. However, in a fight between experts, it was more than enough time. Guild Leader, Lifeless Thorn is really scary. Azura's commander will definitely lose, Featherwind excitedly announced. Good. As expected of the publicly acknowledged, #1 expert. If Shurfeng lost, Lifeless Thorn would be Cold Wind City's undisputed, #1 expert. The Azura adventurer team's reputation would plummet, and although it would still pose a threat to Matchless Family, it wouldn't rule over Cold Wind City. As the upper echelons of Cold Wind City's large guild sighed with relief, Shurfeng walked towards his opponent. You are correct. A player's strength doesn't solely depend on their combat techniques. Attributes and skills do play a factor, Shurfeng said, nodding. He then activated Tier 2 Blade Liberation and 9 Dragon Slash. Suddenly, the intensity of Shurfeng's aura skyrocketed. At the same time, 12 Abyssal Blade Phantoms manifested around him. You have a hidden class as well. Lifeless Thorn was dazed as he felt the power of Shurfeng's aura, his heart pounding madly. Suddenly, he lost his previous confidence. Twofold Berserk was his biggest trump card. With absolute power, he could easily overwhelm his opponents, even if his techniques were inferior. However, based on the man's aura, Shurfeng's basic attributes were now much higher than his. His opponent's 12 phantom swords even outnumbered his prided adjudication spears. As Lifeless Thorn stared, Shurfeng appeared before him and lightly swung Killing Ray. Tier 2 Legacy Skill, Shadow Blade. Although Lifeless Thorn tried to defend himself, he was too slow, and 10 streaks of light, 1 blue and 9 black, struck him. Instantly, Lifeless Thorn's HP vanished, his body transforming into particles of light as he disappeared. As if time had frozen, silence dominated the combat room. Lifeless Thorn, Cold Wind City's #1 expert, had been defeated. Chapter 1461, Abyssal Blade Evolves. Chapter 1461, Abyssal Blade Evolves. Only after the system had announced the duel's outcome did the audience react. He won, just like that. So fast. I couldn't even see what he did. Is this really a balanced mode PvP duel? Why do I feel like that guy is much stronger than Lifeless Thorn? Most people weren't surprised by the battle's outcome. After all, both Shurfeng and Lifeless Thorn gave the city's large guilds headaches. It wasn't surprising to discover that one was stronger than the other. Rather, they were shocked over the battle's process. After watching the duel, the expert players that had hesitated over joining the Azura adventurer team swore that they would join. Just who is this guy? Despair tore at Thundering Sky's heart as he watched Shurfeng descend from the stage. He had hoped that even if Lifeless Thorn weren't a match for the swordsman, the difference between them wouldn't be so great. However, that clearly wasn't the case. Even an amateur could tell that Shurfeng and Lifeless Thorn were on completely different levels. Thundering Sky could already foresee the Azura adventurer team lording over Cold Wind City within a short time. His only choice was to rein in his members, avoiding provoking Azura's members as he bided for time until Hecate arrived. He had no other options. The commander is so amazing. I want to see what Waveheart intends to do now. Yenya and the other Azura members were ecstatic. They had personally watched as Lifeless Thorn's undefeated legend was shattered, and a new legend was born in Cold Wind City. Azura could become one of the top adventurer teams in the Ice Crystal world, not to mention becoming Cold Wind City's overlord. Below the stage, Lifeless Thorn wore a blank look as he resurrected. I lost. He couldn't help but recall the final scene of the battle. Although Shurfeng had used the opportunity to attack while he had been stunned, he wasn't sure that he could have blocked all 10 attacks as they aimed for his blind spots even if he hadn't been dazed. Even with his adjudication spears, he would have been lucky to block half of those attacks. In the end, nothing would have changed. He would have died all the same. He now realized that, aside from inferior basic attributes and combat standards, he didn't even have enough combat experience to stand against Shurfeng. The man had the kind of combat experience that only came from risking one's life in one battle after another. Taking a few deep breaths, Lifeless Thorn approached Shurfeng. I sincerely accept my defeat. I will adhere to my promise and join Azura. However, I'd like to ask you about something. Of course, you may also refuse to answer, Lifeless Thorn said. Ask away. I'll answer as best as I can, Shifeng offered. If I'm not mistaken, you should be a player from another region, correct? Lifeless Thorn asked, a hint of excitement coloring his voice. That's right. I'm not from the Cold Wind City region, Shifeng acknowledged, not bothering to hide the truth. The conclusion was easy to reach if one watched carefully. God's domain had launched some time ago, and experts who were capable of becoming famous had already made a name for themselves. Even if they weren't well known, there should be some news of their achievements. It simply wasn't possible for such a terrifyingly powerful, unknown expert to pop in out of nowhere. The only explanation was that he had come from another region. If an ordinary player's arrival from another region were discovered, it could cause the player a lot of trouble. Shifeng, however, wasn't worried. Cold Wind City didn't have a player who would dare cause him trouble. I knew it. Eagerly, Lifeless Thorn asked, are there a lot of experts where you come from? A lot. Too many to count, Shifeng responded after giving the matter some thought. Shifeng realized what Lifeless Thorn was trying to say. To put it simply, the Berserker wanted to know if there were a lot of experts who were stronger than him. In reality, Lifeless Thorn was a refinement realm expert. However, he lacked combat experience. There weren't enough experts in Cold Wind City to spar with. As a result, his combat style was monotonous. Although it was effective against weaker players, experts of the same caliber could easily overcome his attacks. Of course, Lifeless Thorn wasn't the only person in such a predicament. Solitary 9 and the other experts faced the same problem. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do about it due to the Ice Crystal World's unique rules. Fortunately, if Lifeless Thorn and the others were trained properly, they could increase their strength in a short amount of time. Currently, Zero Wing was expanding on two fronts. Although the guild seemed strong on the surface, it sorely lacked experts. Recruiting Lifeless Thorn and these other experts would be of great help. Then, can you take me there? I promise that I'll fully devote myself to the Azura Adventurer team, I won't join any other power. Hearing Shifeng's words, fighting spirit burned in Lifeless Thorn's gaze. He wanted to rush out of the Ice Crystal World and face those experts as soon as possible. Not now. I still have some matters that I need to deal with. Once I've finished, I'll lead the top-ranking experts in Azura to develop elsewhere, Shifeng said, shaking his head. In reality, he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible as well, but he couldn't return to God's domain until he collected the Eternal Ice Crystals. And unfortunately, he didn't have a strong enough team to raid the Snow Rift's ancient shrine yet. We'll leave once you finish your task. Lifeless Thorn's excitement grew. Commander, just tell me what you need. My team will accomplish it for you. I need to collect a sufficient number of ice crystal fragments. The more, the better. Only the Snow Rift's boss monsters, Great Lord rank and above, have a chance of dropping them, Shifeng explained. Understood. I'll lead a team and kill those bosses right away. Lifeless Thorn nodded, turning to prepare to depart. Hold on a minute. Before you go, take a look at these. Shifeng snatched the impatient berserker's collar. First, he added Lifeless Thorn as a friend. He then sent the man a tutorial video for Void Steps. This is only a tutorial. How much of it you learn depends on you. Void Steps was an advanced footwork technique, which Shifeng taught Zero Wing's core members. Even if a player failed to learn the full technique, they could grow stronger by studying it. Now that Lifeless Thorn had officially joined Azura, it was best that he learn the technique as quickly as possible. This is, shock-colored Lifeless Thorn's face as he watched the tutorial video. He had never expected Shifeng to give it away so nonchalantly. His heart warmed, and his respect of this swordsman grew. After the duel, Cold Wind City's experts surged towards Azura's residence. In a few short hours, Azura's member count shot past 5,000. Although only 1,000 or so were official members, the rest became reserve members. Even so, so many experts made it easier for Shifeng to kill the Snow Rift's field bosses easily. He split the 5,000-plus Azura members into 50-man teams and sent the teams to various locations of the Snow Rift. Any team that encountered a Great Lord or higher boss was to contact him immediately. This way, he could use space movement to transport Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and the others' help. Their grinding efficiency was leaps and bounds above what Shifeng could accomplish on his own. In addition, he activated Divine Providence before landing the final blow, using the skill to increase the drop rate for ice crystal fragments. He had to admit again that Icarus's heart was a godly tool. With Divine Providence, he claimed one ice crystal fragment from every 6 or 7 Great Lords. He also obtained a fragment from every 3 or so Grand Lords he killed. Unfortunately, Snow Rift had a limited number of Grand Lord-ranked field bosses. On the bright side, since no one had pioneered the Snow Rift yet, plenty of bosses were available in the Forbidden Land. Their spawn rate was incredibly fast as well. As a result, Shifeng constantly slaughtered bosses. Shifeng only gathered 100 ice crystal fragments after 3 days of grinding. By relying on Divine Providence, he transformed those 100 fragments into 10 eternal ice crystals. During this period, Shifeng had also risen from level 57 to level 58. Naturally, Lifeless Thorn and the others' levels skyrocketed, rising from level 45 to level 48 in just 3 days, pulling far ahead of Cold Wind City's other experts. Although Shifeng had achieved his goal, he didn't rush to turn in his quest. Rather, he ventured to a deserted location and took out the Abyssal Blade. He then attempted to evolve the magic weapon with the eternal ice crystals. I hope this will work. Shifeng took in a deep breath and clicked the Evolve button on the Abyssal Blade's attribute panel. He chose the eternal ice crystals as the evolution material. Chapter 1462, Tier 2 Magic Weapon. Chapter 1462, Tier 2 Magic Weapon. Even after Shifeng selected the evolution material, the Abyssal Blade didn't react. Must it be mana crystals or nothing? Shifeng frowned. The last time he had found a mana crystal, it had been a coincidence. They were practically impossible to hunt down. As Shifeng was about to give up, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, replacement evolution material detected, Eternal Ice Crystal. Do you wish to abandon the power of frost contained within the eternal ice crystals and evolve the Abyssal Blade? Abandon the power of frost? Although he was confused, Shifeng ecstatically clicked Continue. Suddenly, the 10 eternal ice crystals in Shifeng's hands shattered, 2 clouds of smoke, one black and one white, emerging from their remains. Following which, the black smoke entered the Abyssal Blade. In response, the Abyssal Blade leaped from its sheath and hovered before Shifeng, trembling as it released dragon roars that echoed throughout the wilderness. At the same time, blood-red runes began to surface around the weapon. When the blood-red runes covered the sword entirely, the weapon began to release a rapidly growing pressure. Rather than a sword, Shifeng felt as if he stood before an angry dragon. The pressure was so great that he even struggled to breathe. The phenomenon only began to weaken after about 10 seconds. Eventually, the Abyssal Blade returned to its peaceful state. After evolving, the Abyssal Blade's appearance had transformed slightly. Now, the sword was entirely pitch black. It also radiated a faint trace of black miasma. A black dragon coiled around the sword's hilt, and blood-red runes had carved themselves into the blade. Overall, the Abyssal Blade's new appearance looked evil. What powerful attributes! Shifeng exclaimed when he inspected the attribute panel. Abyssal Blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon. Attack power plus 1720. All attributes plus 130. Attack speed plus 24. Ignore levels plus 18. Attacks have 60% chance to cause 220% damage. 37% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases damage by 2% to a maximum of 20%. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 5. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 45. Can be upgraded, devour 100 level 50 fine gold weapons and 30 level 50 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 45. Equipment tier 2. Can be evolved, devour 100 mana crystals or eternal ice crystals to evolve to tier 3. Additional active skill 1, Phantom Kill, tier 2. Instantly creates a doppelganger under the wielder's control. Doppelganger has 90% of the wielder's attributes and all skills. The wielder can swap positions with the doppelganger at any time. Duration, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 2, Abyssal Bind, tier 2. Binds up to 3 enemies simultaneously and prevents movement, reducing defense and magic resistance by 100%. The higher tiered the target is, the weaker the effect will be. Duration, 5 seconds. Cooldown, 40 seconds. Additional active skill 3, 9 Dragon's Slash, tier 2. Instantly creates 16 phantoms of the Abyssal Blade for wielder's use, each phantom sword deals up to 80% damage. Duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 4, Abyssal Curse, tier 2. Prevents all targets within a radius of 50 yards from moving or attacking for 6 seconds and reduces their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Effect doubles if there is only one target in range. Cooldown, 20 minutes. Additional passive skill, Abyssal Will. Improves wielder's physique depending on the surrounding mana density. The higher the mana density, the greater the improvement. Additional Profound Inheritance, Black Emperor, tier 2. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of death aura. Each stack can be used to increase all attributes by 2% and attack speed and movement speed by 1% for 12 seconds or to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 4 seconds. Maximum of 30 stacks of death aura. Duration, 10 minutes. Cooldown, 8 hours. The famed smith Ulysses personally created the Abyssal Blade using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, ranking 31st. Chapter 1463, Origin Weapon. Chapter 1463, Origin Weapon. When Shurfeng tapped on the crystal, a brief introduction opened before him. As he read the text, Shurfeng was stunned. This is an elemental source. Shurfeng couldn't believe his eyes. Source of true frost. Contains the purest frost power. Although the introduction was simple, almost everyone had known about elemental sources in the past. Any elemental source was valued more than an epic item. In fact, most people offered 2 epic items for a single crystal. However, players almost never sold them. The elemental mana within elemental sources was even purer than 7 luminaries crystals, and these items had a wide variety of uses. They could be used in forging, alchemy, engineering, magic arrays, and so on. If one used an elemental source while crafting a weapon or equipment, said item would obtain the power within the elemental source. Not only would this strengthen the item's attributes, but it would also carry a powerful original skill. If one could produce an epic weapon or equipment with an origin skill, its value would only be second to fragmented legendary items. Fragmented legendary items were extremely rare in God's domain. Even first-rate guilds were lucky to have a handful, much less second- and third-rate guilds. Hence, in the past, epic origin weapons and equipment became some of the best the various large guilds could procure in large quantities. The epic weapon Shifeng had used in the past had been refined by a Grandmaster Forger who used an elemental source. To obtain the weapon, he had spent more than half of the wealth he had accumulated throughout playing God's Domain. Although hiring a Master Forger would have been cheaper, it was much safer to hire a Grandmaster. He had never expected to get his hands on an elemental source this early. Shifeng now understood how he had activated a new expansion pack that would require a 4-hour-long update. When elemental sources had made their appearance in the past, it had started a new era for lifestyle players. That had been due to the various uses for these crystals. Elemental sources could even help lifestyle classes improve their abilities. Hence, a lot of changes had to happen to the game. After the first elemental source had appeared in the game, the crystals became more common. If one were lucky, they could even obtain one from a dark gold treasure chest. No one knows the elemental source's true value yet. I can use this opportunity to send Melancholic Smile to purchase them. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng realized that he had to purchase the crystals in bulk. At first, everyone would treat the elemental source as some kind of rare material, selling it for several hundred gold apiece. By the time they realized its true value, they'd regret selling the items. Conversely, many large guilds would make a huge profit from hoarding the elemental sources. Shifeng then found a safe location and logged out of the game. The new expansion pack had been too sudden. When Shifeng opened his eyes inside the virtual gaming cabin, the sun outside the window was just beginning to set. Before Shifeng had the chance to climb out of the gaming cabin, a series of notifications bombarded his senses. They only stopped after the notification sound repeated several dozen times. Taking his time, Shifeng left to get something to eat and drink. He only read through the messages after settling down to eat at the table. Contact between the ice crystal world and the continent of God's Domain was not possible. Hence, he had instructed Melancholic Smile and Gentle Snow to keep him up to date via offline messages. However, to obtain the required elemental ice crystals as quickly as possible, he had remained in the game for 3 days straight. They're finally willing to let go, huh? Shifeng smiled as he read a message from Gentle Snow. Recently, nothing major had occurred in God's Domain. The most noteworthy development was that Gentle Snow had finally captured Hidden Fog Town. Meanwhile, Zero Wings branch guild in the Black Dragon Empire had recruited 70,000 additional members. The number might not be significant for a first-rate guild, but it was a different story for Zero Wing. After all, Zero Wing's recruitment requirements were quite strict. Players capable of passing the entrance test would be elite players in the public's eyes. It was impressive that a branch guild had recruited so many members so quickly. But Shifeng wasn't surprised. What made him smile was the news that the companies that had supported Ouroboros had finally agreed to sell the training center to Gentle Snow. She had already begun the price negotiations. Once both sides finished signing the necessary contracts, Ouroboros' training center would become Zero Wing's main headquarters. In the future, Zero Wing could recruit large batches of internal members without worrying about space. As Shifeng browsed through the other messages, his virtual gaming cabin's offline communicator rang. The caller ID belonged to Phoenix Rain. Shifeng reconnected to the game and entered his offline rest space. After doing so, he accepted the call. Immediately, a virtual screen appeared before him. The screen showcased Phoenix Rain, who currently wore a set of exquisite, blue mage robes. She had already reached level 48, and excluding Zero Wing's members, she could hold the top position on the Black Dragon Empire's ranking list. Phoenix Pavilion Master, to what do I owe the pleasure? Has something urgent happened? Shifeng asked curiously. Indeed, something has happened. I've been competing with 9 Dragons Emperor on a quest, but for some reason, something has changed on his side. Not only did he complete the quest before I did, but he's also completed the quest much sooner than expected. Many of the guild elders have begun to side with him. Now, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion just so happens to be activating some ancient ruin. I hope that guild leader Black Flame can lend me a few experts on the raid, Phoenix Raid said straightforwardly, not bothering to hide anything from Shifeng. As for the remuneration, I'll sell you a high potential shop in the Apocalypse Empire's capital. What do you say? She had an acute understanding of Zero Wings experts. This was especially true for Zhao Yueru, who had participated in the Black Dragon Empire's ranking competition. There was also Aqua Rose to consider, who had put on a shocking performance during the siege war in Green Rain Town. If experts like these women joined her team, she'd have a much higher chance of successfully raiding the ancient ruin her guild had found. Shifeng was surprised to hear Phoenix Rain's offer. He had never thought that this woman would be generous enough to sell an imperial capital shop for a handful of experts. Such shops were incredibly hard to come by. Many organizations offered 2 or 3 times the market price for them, but only a fool would willingly sell an imperial capital shop so early in the game. Ancient ruins? Can you tell me which ancient ruins you intend to raid? Shifeng asked after calming down. We've activated the Apocalypse Empire's Sunset Forest, Phoenix Rain answered, confused as to why he'd ask such a question. I see. Realization immediately dawned on Shifeng. After giving the matter some thought, he said, if you wish to borrow some manpower, then you shall have it. However, I have a better proposal. I'll help you clear the ruins. In return, I want 20% of the resources we obtained during the raid. God's domain had countless ancient ruins, many of which stored various items and materials that had been hidden since before the Great Destruction. Normally, these items wouldn't surface on the market. Meanwhile, the Apocalypse Empire's Sunset Forest had been particularly famous in the past due to its ancient origin wood, a top-tier material used in ships' construction. Phoenix Rain couldn't help but frown when she heard Shifeng's counteroffer. Seeing the man's confidence, she had to ask, that's a level 50 to level 60, grade 1 ancient ruin. Are you confident in clearing it? The representative has stated that the White Tiger Dojo has agreed to your conditions and would like to invite you to discuss the details, Liang Jing reported. They've agreed. Shifeng suddenly remembered his conversation with the White Tiger Dojo's Jiang Tianyuan regarding his price for nurturing their experts. He then revealed a smile and said, tell the representative that I've doubled my price. They can take it or leave it. Even with his high ice resistance, Shifeng couldn't help but shiver. The originally dark purple magic array scrolls lightened to an icy blue. Had Shifeng not been prepared, using Earth Dragon skin as the scroll's base material, the magic array scrolls would have exploded from so much energy. Shifeng waited until the turbulent power within the magic array scrolls calmed before storing them. Magic array scrolls produced with elemental sources are pretty impressive. I wonder how the effects have changed. Only the city's 2 large guilds had a substantial stock. Fortunately, Shifeng wasn't concerned about either issue. During the last 3 days, he had spent his time killing level 50+ Great Lords and Grand Lords, obtaining a large stock of materials. As for magic crystals, he still had over 30,000 on him. That was more than enough to produce weapons and equipment. Hello, sir. How may I be of service? An NPC receptionist greeted Shifeng sweetly. I wish to rent a special mana forging room for 2 hours, Shifeng stated. The mana forging rooms had greater mana density than the average forging room. Though they weren't on the level of a meditation room of the same rank, they could improve a player's concentration. Understood, sir. That will be 50 silver, the NPC receptionist said as she offered Shifeng a key. Handing over the 50 silver coins, Shifeng grabbed the key and went to the Forging Association's top floor. The Ice Crystal World's forging guidance system is amazing, Shifeng thought as he opened the forging guidance system for the special mana forging room. Previously, he had thought that the forging guidance system only offered fine gold and dark gold weapon and equipment designs. Now, he discovered that it also sold set equipment designs. As Shifeng wondered why he hadn't seen anyone in Cold Wind City wearing fine gold or dark gold set equipment, his eyes fell on the designs' price tags. The designs for level 45, dark gold equipment only cost 100 magic crystals. To purchase the designs for 6 pieces, one would have to spend 600 crystals. However, the design for a 6-piece, level 45, dark gold set equipment cost 1,800 crystals, 2,500 crystals for an 8-piece version. Moreover, the design was a one-time use item, it would disappear regardless of the player's success. Not even a first-rate guild's leader would mess around with so many magic crystals, much less guilds like Centurion Dynasty and Matchless Family. Based on magic crystals' market price, each attempt to forge an 8-piece, dark gold set equipment would cost over 700 gold. Moreover, the forging success rate for set equipment was much lower than that of individual items of the same level and rank. Even the forging guidance system only allowed players to temporarily increase their forging success rate by 7% for a price. An advanced forger would be lucky if their base success rate reached 8% with level 45, dark gold set equipment. Most would have a total success rate of only 15%. With such a low chance, it'd be a miracle if a forger succeeded once with every 10 tries. Even wealthy guilds and players wouldn't dare waste their money so extravagantly. With this, my trip has definitely been worth the trouble. Shifeng's eyes glittered as he gazed at the various dark gold set equipment designs the forging guidance system displayed. It would be very difficult for an advanced forger to produce a dark gold set equipment, but to a master forger such as Shifeng, it'd be easy. His base success rate had already reached 20%. Including the Book of Forging, the Mysterious Flame, the Master Forger's Insignia, and the Black Steel Insignia, he could easily achieve a success rate of more than 35%. With the forging guidance system, that would put his forging success rate at over 42%. Following which, Shifeng bought the design for an 8-piece, level 45, dark gold set equipment for shield warriors and began to craft. Shifeng started to refine and shape one material after another. Due to the Abyssal blade, the density of the ambient mana rose even higher, increasing his concentration. Before Shifeng knew it, he had produced the Protector set. This set's attributes are really powerful. No wonder it costs 2,500 magic crystals per attempt. Shifeng was astonished as he inspected the Protector set's attributes. The set's basic attributes could already rival that of individual level 50, dark gold equipment. Chapter 1467, Skill that Overcomes Tears. Chapter 1467, Skill that Overcomes Tears. The boss dropped so many items. We hit a jackpot. Is this for real? This is the first time I've seen a jackpot. Look. There are weapons and equipment among the loot. Centurion Dynasty and Matchless Family will die from envy when they hear about this. Everyone gaped at the miniature mountain of items. Although they were shocked that they had actually killed the three-headed frost wolf, its loot was even more astounding. In God's domain, monsters at level 50 and above would have drastically reduced drop rates. Even the monsters in forbidden lands like the Snow Rift usually dropped 4 or 5 items. Moreover, the majority of those items were materials. When they had farmed level 60 Grand Lords, they had only obtained 10 or so items from each boss. Yet, this Grand Lord ranked three-headed Frost Wolf had dropped over 100 items. Why wouldn't they be surprised? Everyone, rest up. We'll enter the cave soon, Shifeng said. He could not help but shake his head and chuckle when he saw his team members' excited expressions. The weapons and equipment a level 67 Grand Lord were about as tempting as a level 45, Dark Gold set equipment. It was common knowledge that monsters beyond level 50 rarely dropped good weapons or equipment. This was particularly true for the Ice Crystal world. Although the forging guidance system offered forging designs for level 50+ items, they were far more expensive than the level 45 variants. Most importantly, one's forging success rate would drastically decrease when attempting to craft such high-level items. It was already far more difficult to forge level 50, fine gold equipment than it was to forge the level 45 version, much less level 50+, dark gold equipment. Among the 100+ items, over 60% consisted of materials for forging level 50+ weapons and equipment. There were also over a dozen Master Mana Recovery Potions, Master Recovery Potions, and Attribute Gemstones of various kinds, 5 Tier 2 Magic Scrolls, and 2 Tier 3 Magic Scrolls. One of the Tier 3 Magic Scrolls was a group instantaneous teleportation scroll, and the other was a defensive magic scroll. 5 pieces of level 60, fine gold equipment and 2 pieces of level 60, dark gold equipment had also dropped. However, among these dropped items, one caught Shifeng's eye, a thick, golden book. The book's cover didn't offer any clues about its contents. However, when Shifeng examined the book, he was ecstatic. What a surprise! I never thought that a mere gatekeeper would drop this thing. My trip to the Ice Crystal world has been pretty profitable. Shifeng's eyes shone as he gazed at the golden book. The book was neither a design nor a recipe. It wasn't some sort of treasure map or special item either. It was only a skill book. However, despite being only a skill book, it was even more valuable than the super rare Berserk skill books. Players had collectively referred to this kind of book as a combination skill book in the past. Combination skill books had been as valuable as epic items. Shifeng had tried to bid for a combination skill book in the past, but in the end, a first-rate guild had won the book for 50,000 magic crystals. Shadow had only saved 30,000 magic crystals. Shifeng had never expected to obtain a combination skill book from killing the three-headed frost wolf. Multiple players could learn from a single combination skill book, some only allowed 2 players to learn the skill, while 3 to 5 players could learn from others. If players activated a combination skill with the specified number of players, they could exert frighteningly destructive power with the skill. In the past, this had been the various large guilds' main method of dealing with powerful bosses. After all, God's domain had many incredibly powerful monsters. Chapter 1468, Raiding a Mythic. Chaptering 1468, Raiding a Mythic. Mythic. Before they even checked the Titan Warriors' statistics, the pressure it radiated overwhelmed the team. Now that they had seen its information, they were shocked. No one throughout Cold Wind City, not even an expert like Lifeless Thorn, had ever seen a mythic monster. Now that they stood before one, they were terrified to stand within 500 yards of the Titan warrior, not to mention attempt to fight the thing. This was the first time they had felt anything like this since they joined God's domain. Their minds screamed at them, warning that if they proceeded, they would dance with death. Commander, this monster is too powerful. We can't afford to provoke a monster like this yet. Do we have to fight it? Solitary 9 asked, his complexion ashen. Before he had encountered the Titan warrior, he had thought that it might be possible for their team to defeat a mythic monster. However, after experiencing the Titan warrior's near-tangible killing intent and absolute power, he knew that Tier 1 players had no hope against it. The Titan warrior's battle recovery alone would regenerate 3,600,000 HP every 5 seconds. If their team couldn't deal over 720,000 damage each second, their team would never kill it, even if the Titan warrior stood there and watched them try. This wasn't a battle. This was a suicide mission. A mechanical life form? Shifeng fell into deep thought as he watched the Titan warrior. Although he had known that the final guardian boss would be a mythic monster, he hadn't expected it to be a mechanical life form. Mechanical life forms were famed for their high defense, strength, and magic resistance. Because of these stats, they were known to be the best guard monsters available. Even super guilds struggled against mechanical life form bosses since they couldn't take advantage of their collection of high-tiered magic scrolls and mana pulse cannons. Even magic arrays had little effect against these creatures. Players could only defeat a mechanical life form with brute strength, there simply weren't any loopholes. "Commander, are we still going to fight that thing?" Lifeless Thorn asked hesitantly. Before they had come here, Shifeng had told Azura's upper echelons that they could travel to another world if they finished this quest. They wouldn't have to stay cooped up in Cold Wind City, but as they faced an insurmountable mythic monster, even Lifeless Thorn felt helpless. This wasn't some random dungeon. If they died in this cave, they would lose an entire level. At their level, recovering the lost EXP would take a lot of time. "Let's make an attempt," Shifeng said after giving the matter some thought. The attempt? Lifeless Thorn and the others were slightly confused. Shifeng took a Tier 2 summoning scroll from his bag and summoned a Tier 2 Gale Cheetah. He then used Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger forward while he directed the Gale Cheetah to circle the boss. He wanted to test the Titan warrior's reaction and turning speed. Although mechanical lifeforms had high defense and strength, they also had a glaring weakness: slow reaction and turning speed. Of course, this was only compared to monsters of the same rank. A Mythic-ranked mechanical lifeform's reaction and turning speed should be higher than a Grand Lord's of the same level. As his doppelganger approached the Titan warrior, Shifeng sat down and focused on controlling his summoned twin. 400 yards. 300 yards. When the doppelganger moved within 200 yards of the guardian boss, the previously immobile mythic monster abruptly opened its eyes, revealing two dazzling, crimson orbs. It advanced on the doppelganger so quickly that by the time the watching crowd reacted, the boss had crossed 40 yards. In fact, he had expected the result. Combination skills were extraordinarily rare. If a team had one, it would elevate the team's damage output to a whole new level. Needless to say, the effects of such a skill against the earthen spirit, which had been suppressed to a great lord standard, would be marvelous. However, although combination skills were very powerful, their cooldowns were long. These cooldowns generally lasted a minute or longer. The earthen spirit's death granted the team members a large amount of EXP. Unfortunately, the Grand Lord hadn't dropped any items. On the bright side, with one earthen spirit down, it became much easier to deal with the remaining three. Less than 1 minute had passed between the first elemental's death and the last. When the team saw their overall damage, they felt as if they were dreaming. "Everyone, focus your on fire the Titan warrior," Shifeng shouted once the earthen spirits were gone. "Lifeless, only jump in after Triple Frostman's cooldown has ended." Understood. The team turned towards their last, and largest, target. With Anna and Kite's help, the team's overall damage output increased by a large chunk. As a result, the Titan warrior's HP steadily fell. 98%. 95%. 90%. Time passed quickly. Throughout the battle, Shifeng focused on controlling the two demons, distracting the Titan warrior. When the demon's HP fell below 30%, he moved forward and activated Life Domain, healing all allies within a 50-yard radius by 10% every second for 30 seconds. The rest of the team bombarded the mechanical life form with attacks. While Triple Frost Moon was on cooldown, Lifeless Thorns group used Tier 2 magic scrolls to attack. By the time World Projection's duration ended, the Titan warrior only had 63% of its HP remaining. Shifeng then fed the Ring of Gospel another 5,000 magic crystals and activated the skill once more. However, with this investment, Shifeng ran out of magic crystals. When the Titan warrior's HP reached 30%, the mythic monster bellowed and tossed its greatsword away. It then retrieved the two crimson sabers from its back and changed its attack pattern. Although its attack power had declined, its attack rate had doubled. Shifeng had already struggled with maneuvering the two demons to block the Titan warrior's attacks, but the sudden change overwhelmed him. As a result, the demons' HPs began to plummet. Even when Kite and the Golden Giant tried to help, they only slowed the draining HP slightly. When one demon's HP fell below 50% and the other fell below 30%, the Titan warrior merged its twin sabers. It pointed its weapon at the demon with less than 30% of its HP. Suddenly, a scorching, red beam of light shot forward, tearing through the demon and only stopping after it crashed into the magic barrier. Even the magic barrier trembled when the beam struck. The fear demon died on the spot. The tomahawk demon received some damage from the resulting shockwave as well, its HP falling to 31%. With only one demon remaining, Shifeng had a harder time blocking the guardian boss's attacks. The tomahawk lost 2% of its HP or more every second. Seeing this, Shifeng realized that this fight had reached a critical moment. He immediately turned to Anna and commanded, "Activate Angel Summoning." The NPC didn't hesitate to start the incantation. When the tomahawk demon's HP fell below 10%, a white-winged Valkyrie descended onto the battlefield. Her wings shuddering slightly, she arrived before the Titan warrior, her golden spear sweeping towards the mythic monster. A golden flash blinded the players, and the impact threw the incomparably powerful Titan warrior over 30 yards away, a damage of over -1 million appearing above its head. Before the Titan warrior could react, the Valkyrie stood before it again, thrusting her spear of thunder into the mythic monster's heart, devouring a large chunk of its HP.